Hello, horror lover. Are you ready for a long night of nightmares? Before we begin, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and especially leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the crunch of leaves beneath my boots and the gentle rustle of wind through the trees were the only sounds accompanying me as I trudged deeper into the Catskill forest. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. I adjusted the straps of my heavy backpack, feeling the weight of my camping gear and the notebook I hoped to fill with ideas for my next novel. "This is it, Jack," I muttered to myself. "No distractions, no excuses, just you and the great outdoors. Time to break that writer's block." I'd been struggling for months to come up with a compelling story, my publisher growing increasingly impatient with each passing week. This solo camping trip was my last-ditch effort to find inspiration, to reconnect with the passion that had driven me to become a writer in the first place. After another hour of hiking, I finally reached a small clearing that seemed perfect for setting up camp. A babbling brook ran nearby, providing a soothing background noise and a convenient water source. I shrugged off my backpack with a grunt of relief and began to unpack. As I worked on pitching my tent, my mind wandered to the stories my grandfather used to tell about these mountains. Tales of ancient spirits and mysterious disappearances that had both terrified and fascinated me as a child. I chuckled, shaking my head at the memory. "Maybe that's what I need," I said aloud, hammering the last tent stake into the ground. A good old-fashioned ghost story. With the tent secure, I gathered some rocks to form a fire pit. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. I collected fallen branches and twigs from the edge of the clearing, building a small pyramid in the center of the pit. As darkness fell, I struck a match and touched it to the kindling. The fire caught quickly, growing from a small flame to a cheerful blaze. I sat back on a fallen log, watching the flames dance and listening to the wood crackle. The warmth of the fire was comforting as the night air grew cooler. I pulled out my notebook and pen, ready to jot down any ideas that might come to me. But as the minutes ticked by, the page remained stubbornly blank. I sighed, tossing the notebook aside. "Come on, Jack. Think. There has to be a story here somewhere." As if in response to my frustration, the fire suddenly flared, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. I blinked, startled by the sudden intensity, and then I heard it. A whisper, so faint I almost missed it beneath the sound of the crackling flames. I leaned forward, straining my ears. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish even as I did so. "Is someone there?" Silence greeted me, broken only by the pop and hiss of burning wood. I shook my head, chuckling nervously. "Great, Jack. First night out and you're already hearing things. Get it together, man." I reached for my canteen, taking a long swig of water. As I lowered the bottle, the whisper came again, louder this time. It seemed to be coming from the fire itself, a soft, sibilant sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Jack." I froze, the canteen slipping from my suddenly numb fingers. That was my name. The fire had spoken my name. "No," I said aloud, my voice shaky. "No, that's impossible. I'm just tired. My mind is playing tricks on me." But even as I tried to rationalize it, the whisper came again, unmistakable this time. "Jack. We've been waiting for you, Jack." I scrambled to my feet, nearly tripping over the log in my haste to put distance between myself and the fire. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "This isn't funny." The flames seemed to grow, reaching higher into the night sky, and within their dancing light I saw something that turned my blood to ice. A face formed of fire and shadow, its features constantly shifting but unmistakably there. "We know you, Jack," the face in the flames spoke, its voice a chorus of whispers. "We know the darkness you hide, the secrets you keep." I wanted to run, to flee back down the trail and never look back, but my legs wouldn't move. I stood there, transfixed by the impossible sight before me. What are you?" I managed to choke out. The face in the fire seemed to smile, a terrifying sight that sent shivers down my spine. We are the keepers of stories, Jack, the guardians of truths long forgotten, and you have a story we want to hear. My mind reeled, struggling to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. And yet, the heat of the fire on my face, the acrid smell of smoke in my nostrils, it all felt too vivid to be a dream or hallucination. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What story? What do you want from me? The fire roared suddenly, causing me to stumble back. The face grew larger, filling my entire field of vision. We want the story you've buried deep, Jack. The one you've tried so hard to forget. Images flashed through my mind, fragments of memories I'd long suppressed. A dark night, a terrible choice, a secret I'd sworn never to reveal. How could this thing know about that? No, I said, shaking my head vigorously. No, I won't talk about that. I can't. The fire crackled ominously. Oh, but you will, Jack. You made a promise long ago. It's time to pay your debt. Promise? Debt? I had no idea what the entity was talking about, but a deep, primal fear had taken root in my chest. Whatever was happening, I knew instinctively that I was in grave danger. With a supreme effort of will, I managed to take a step back, then another. Stay away from me, I said, my voice trembling. Whatever you are, whatever you want, just stay away. The face in the flame seemed to grow sad, almost pitying. You can't run from us, Jack. We're a part of you now. We've always been a part of you. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush with no regard for the branches that whipped at my face and arms. I had to get away, had to put as much distance as possible between myself and that terrifying, impossible fire. But even as I fled, I could hear the whispers following me, carried on the wind. Run all you want, Jack. We'll be waiting. Your story isn't finished yet. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like jelly. Finally, I collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The forest around me was dark and silent, no sign of pursuit. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something out there in the darkness was waiting. As my breathing slowly returned to normal, I realized with a sinking feeling that I had no idea where I was. In my panic, I'd run blindly into the forest, leaving behind my tent, my supplies, everything. I slid down to sit at the base of the tree, wrapping my arms around my knees. What had just happened? Was I losing my mind? Or was there really something supernatural out there in the forest? Something that knew my deepest, darkest secrets? As the adrenaline wore off, exhaustion began to set in. Despite my fear, my eyelids grew heavy. The last thing I remember thinking before sleep claimed me was a grim realization. I'd come to these mountains looking for a story. The first rays of dawn filtered through the dense canopy, rousing me from my fitful sleep. For a moment I lay there, disoriented, my back aching from the hard forest floor. Then the memories of the previous night came rushing back, and I bolted upright, my heart racing. It was just a dream, I muttered, running a hand through my disheveled hair. A vivid, terrifying dream, but nothing more. I stood up, wincing at the stiffness in my joints, and took stock of my surroundings. The events of the night had left me lost in the vast expanse of the Catskill Forest. I had no supplies, no water, and no idea which direction would lead me back to civilization. Great job, Jack, I chided myself. You came here for inspiration, and now you might die of exposure. Brilliant. With no better option, I picked a direction that seemed to slope downhill, hoping it might lead to a stream or river. As I walked, I tried to rationalize the events of the previous night. Stress, exhaustion, and an overactive imagination. That had to be the explanation. There was no way a campfire had actually spoken to me. After about an hour of walking, I heard the blessed sound of running water. Relief washed over me as I quickened my pace, pushing through a tangle of underbrush to reach the stream's edge. I knelt down, cupping my hands to drink the cool, clear water. As I straightened up, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, I froze. There, on the opposite bank, was a familiar sight. My campsite. Impossible, I whispered. But there it was. My tent, my backpack, and the stone-ringed fire pit. The embers of last night's fire still glowed faintly in the morning light. I waded across the shallow stream, my mind reeling. How had I ended up back here? I was certain I'd run for miles in the opposite direction. As I approached the campsite, a chill ran down my spine. The air seemed to grow colder, heavier somehow. And then I heard it again, that whisper emanating from the dying embers. "Welcome back, Jack." I stumbled backward, nearly losing my footing. "No," I said, shaking my head vigorously. "You're not real. This isn't happening." The embers flared suddenly, and within seconds, a roaring fire had sprung to life in the pit. The face I'd seen the night before materialized in the flames, its features flickering and shifting. "Oh, but we are real, Jack," the fire said, its voice a chorus of whispers. "As real as the guilt you carry, the secrets you keep." I wanted to run again, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if some unseen force held me rooted to the spot. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The face in the fire seemed to smile, a sight that sent shivers down my spine. "We want you to remember, Jack. To face the truth you've tried so hard to forget." Before I could respond, the flames began to shift and swirl. Images started to form within the fire, hazy at first but growing clearer by the second. And with a jolt of shock, I realized I was looking at scenes from my own childhood. "No," I said, trying to look away but finding myself unable to. "Please, don't." But the fire paid no heed to my pleas. The images continued to play out, like some nightmarish home movie. I saw myself as a boy of 10 playing in the backyard of my childhood home. My younger sister Emily was there too, her pigtails bouncing as she chased me around the yard. "I remember this day," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This was the day before." The fire crackled, almost sympathetically. "Yes, Jack. The day before everything changed." The scene shifted. Now I saw myself and Emily sneaking out of the house late at night, giggling at our perceived cleverness. "We just wanted to see the meteor shower," I explained, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to justify my actions to the fire. We weren't supposed to be out, but I convinced Emily it would be worth it. In the flames, I watched as my younger self led Emily down to the creek that ran behind our house. We sat on the bank, our heads tilted back to watch the sky. "I remember how excited she was," I said, a lump forming in my throat. "She kept pointing out every streak of light, even when it was just a plane or satellite." But then the scene in the fire changed, and I felt my heart stop. "No," I whispered. "Please, I don't want to see this part." But the fire was relentless. I watched, helpless as the memory played out. Emily leaning too far over the creek bank, the sound of loose dirt giving way, her scream as she fell into the swollen creek, swollen from recent rains. "I tried to save her," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "I swear I tried." In the flames, I saw my younger self plunge into the creek, desperately trying to reach Emily. But the current was too strong, the water too cold and dark. "I couldn't reach her," I sobbed. "I couldn't." The fire flickered, and suddenly I was watching myself crawl out of the creek, coughing and sputtering. But Emily was nowhere to be seen. "I ran home," I said, the words tumbling out now. "I told our parents it was an accident, that Emily had snuck out on her own. I was so scared they'd blame me. I never told anyone the truth." The face in the fire reappeared, its expression unreadable. "And you've carried that guilt all these years, haven't you, Jack? It's shaped everything you've done, every choice you've made." I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. "But that's not all, is it?" The fire pressed. "There's more to your story, Jack. A promise made in the depths of your grief and guilt." I froze, a long-buried memory stirring in the recesses of my mind. "What are you talking about?" The fire roared higher. Think, Jack. Remember the night after Emily's funeral? The stranger you met in the woods? And suddenly it all came rushing back. A dark night much like this one, my 12-year-old self wandering the woods behind our house, lost in grief and self-loathing. And then... "There was a man," I said, the memory becoming clearer with each passing second. "Or something that looked like a man. He said he could make the pain go away, make me forget." "And what did you promise in return, Jack?" the fire asked, its voice low and intense. I shook my head, not wanting to believe it. But the truth was there, impossible to deny any longer. "My stories," I whispered. I promised him my stories. He said one day he'd come to collect, and I agreed. The fire crackled triumphantly. "And now that day has come, Jack. We are here to collect on that promise." I staggered backward, the full weight of realization crashing down on me. All these years, my writing career, my success, it wasn't really me, was it? "Oh, it was you, Jack," the fire said. "Your talent, your imagination. We simply guided you. And now it's time for you to fulfill your end of the bargain." "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice hollow. The face in the fire grinned, a terrifying sight. "Write for us, Jack. Tell the stories we want to hear. Dark tales, terrifying truths. Pour your guilt, your fear, your regret onto the page." I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by the enormity of what I'd done and what lay ahead. "And if I refuse?" The fire roared, sparks flying into the air. "Refuse? Oh, Jack, you don't have that option. The pact has been made. It's time to pay your debt." As the implications of my long-ago promise sank in, I felt a curious mix of dread and relief. The guilt I'd carried for so long, the secret I'd kept buried, it was all out now. And in a twisted way, I finally had the inspiration I'd been seeking. I reached for my notebook with trembling hands. I'll need my pen." The fire crackled, almost approvingly. "That's a good boy, Jack. Let the stories flow. We'll be right here, watching and waiting." As I put pen to paper, I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me. The forest around me seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the tales I was about to unleash. And so, with the otherworldly fire as my witness, I began to write. The pen trembled in my hand as I scrawled words across the page, my handwriting barely legible in the flickering firelight. I'd been writing for hours, pouring out dark tales and twisted narratives that seemed to spring fully formed from some hidden corner of my mind. The fire crackled and danced, its eerie whispers a constant backdrop to my feverish creativity. As I paused to flex my cramping fingers, the fire's voice grew louder, more insistent. "Keep writing, Jack," it hissed. "We're not finished yet." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that had settled over my thoughts. "I need a break," I muttered. "Just a few minutes." The flames roared higher, and I felt a wave of heat wash over me. "No breaks," the fire insisted. "You made a deal, Jack. It's time to pay up." Something in its tone made me pause. "A deal?" I asked, frowning. "What deal? I don't remember making any deal." The fire chuckled, a sound like crackling embers. "Oh, but you did, Jack. You just don't remember it. Yet." I set my notebook aside, a chill running down my spine despite the warmth of the fire. "What are you talking about? What deal?" The flames shifted, forming into a vaguely humanoid shape. "Think back, Jack, to the darkest time in your life. To the night when you would have given anything to escape your guilt and pain." I closed my eyes, trying to remember. Flashes of memory danced behind my eyelids. The creek where Emily had drowned, the hollow eyes of my parents at her funeral, the suffocating weight of my own guilt. "I remember feeling lost," I said slowly. "Wishing I could forget, or go back and change things." "Yes," the fire whispered. "And on that night, in your darkest moment, you made a choice. The flames shifted again, and suddenly I was watching a scene play out within the fire. I saw myself as a boy, wandering alone in the woods behind our house. My younger self looked small and broken, shoulders hunched against the weight of his guilt. "I remember this," I whispered. "It was the night after Emily's funeral. I couldn't sleep, couldn't face my parents. So I ran." In the fiery tableau, I watched as my younger self stumbled through the dark woods. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind a tree, a tall, shadowy form that seemed to absorb the moonlight around it. "Who are you?" my younger self asked, his voice trembling. The shadowy figure's voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. "I am someone who can help you, Jack. Someone who can take away your pain, your guilt. Would you like that?" I watched, transfixed, as my younger self nodded eagerly. "Yes," he said. "Please. I'll do anything." The shadowy figure seemed to smile, though its face remained hidden. "Anything, Jack? Are you sure about that?" "Yes," my younger self insisted. "I just want to forget. I want the pain to stop." The figure extended a hand, long fingers reaching out toward the boy. "Then we have a deal. I'll take away your guilt, help you forget. And in return, you'll give me your stories." "My stories?" young Jack asked, confusion clear on his face. "Yes," the figure said. "The stories you'll write, the tales you'll tell, they'll belong to me. Do we have a deal?" I watched in horror as my younger self, without hesitation, reached out and shook the shadowy figure's hand. "Deal," he said. The scene in the fire dissolved, leaving me staring at the dancing flames, my mind reeling. "No," I whispered. "No, that can't be real. I don't remember any of that." The fire crackled. "Of course you don't. That was part of the deal. You wanted to forget, and so you did. But a deal is a deal, Jack. And now it's time to pay up." I stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth in front of the fire. "This is insane. I was a child. I didn't know what I was doing." "Ignorance doesn't negate a contract," the fire said, its voice cold. "You made the choice, Jack. You reaped the benefits. And now the bill has come due." I stopped pacing, a terrible realization dawning on me. My writing career, my success. It wasn't real, was it? It was all because of this deal? The fire seemed to shrug, its flames rippling. "Your talent is your own, Jack. We merely guided it, gave you inspiration when you needed it most, helped you forget the guilt that was holding you back." I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by the implications. "So, everything I've achieved, it's all built on a lie." "Not a lie," the fire corrected. "A bargain, one you've benefited from greatly, and now it's our turn to collect." I looked up at the fire, fear and desperation warring within me. "What do you want from me? Haven't I given you enough already?" The flames roared higher, and I felt a searing heat on my face. "We want it all, Jack. Every story, every idea, the darkest corners of your imagination, the tales you're too afraid to tell. That's what you promised us, and that's what we'll have." I shook my head, trying to deny the truth of what I was hearing. But deep down, I knew it was real. The memories were there now, no longer buried but vivid and undeniable. "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. The fire chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Refuse? Oh, Jack, you can't refuse. The deal is made, the contract signed. You can't escape it any more than you can escape your own shadow." I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve growing. There has to be a way out, some loophole, some way to break the contract. The fire roared, sparks flying into the air. "There is no escape, Jack. No loophole, no way out. You're ours now, body and soul. Or should I say, body and stories." As the full weight of my situation crashed down on me, I felt a curious mix of despair and relief. The guilt I'd carried for so long, the secret I'd kept buried, it was all out now. And in a twisted way, I finally understood the source of my inspiration, the wellspring of my creativity. I picked up my notebook, staring at the pages filled with my frenzied writing. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The fire seemed to settle, its flames dancing almost playfully. Now you write, Jack. You pour every dark thought, every twisted fantasy onto the page, and we'll be right here, watching, waiting, feeding on every word." I sat back down, pen poised over a fresh page. "And when I'm done, when I've given you every story I have to tell?" The fire's voice was soft, almost gentle. "When you're done, Jack, well, let's just say you'll have paid your debt in full." The implications of those words sent a chill through me, but I pushed the thought aside. I had no choice now but to see this through, to fulfill the bargain I'd made so long ago. As I began to write, the words flowing faster than ever before, I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me. The forest around me seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the tales I was about to unleash. And so, with the otherworldly fire as my witness and my taskmaster, I wrote. I wrote of darkness and light, of guilt and redemption, of deals made in the shadows and the price of forgotten promises. I wrote as if my life depended on it, because I realized with growing certainty it did. The relentless scratching of pen on paper had become a haunting melody, accompanied by the crackling of the otherworldly fire. I had lost all sense of time, pouring story after story onto the pages of my notebook. My hand ached, my eyes burned, but still, I wrote on, compelled by the unseen force that had claimed me. As I finished another tale of horror and despair, I looked up from my notebook, blinking away the fog of exhaustion. The fire danced before me, its flames taking on an almost gleeful appearance. "Excellent, Jack," the fire whispered, its voice a chorus of hisses and pops. "Your stories feed us, strengthen us. Keep writing." But something had changed. Perhaps it was the endless hours of dark creation, or maybe some part of me had finally reached its breaking point. Whatever the reason, in that moment I knew I couldn't continue. "No," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "No more. I can't do this anymore." The fire roared suddenly, sparks flying into the air. "You don't have a choice, Jack. The deal." "To hell with the deal," I shouted, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. I was a child. I didn't know what I was agreeing to. This ends now. I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. I turned away from the fire, intending to walk away, to leave this nightmare behind me. But as I took my first step, I felt an invisible force grab hold of me, freezing me in place. "You can't leave, Jack," the fire said, its voice now a menacing growl. "You're ours now, body and soul." I struggled against the unseen bonds, panic rising in my chest. "Let me go," I yelled, my voice echoing through the dark forest. "I won't be your puppet anymore." The woods around me seemed to come alive in response to my defiance. The trees creaked and groaned, their branches reaching out like grasping hands. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, taking on monstrous forms. The very air seemed to thicken, pressing in on me from all sides. "Help!" I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice had been stolen, silenced by the same otherworldly power that held me immobile. The fire roared higher, its flames stretching impossibly tall. I could feel its heat on my face, see the tongues of fire reaching out towards me like hungry fingers. "You cannot escape us, Jack," the fire said, its voice now a cacophony of whispers that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Your stories, your imagination, your very essence, it all belongs to us now." I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the nightmarish scene around me. In my mind, I saw flashes of my life, my childhood, my sister's tragic death, the years of guilt and buried memories. And then, unbidden, came images of my writing career, the success I'd achieved, the accolades I had received. All of it, I now realized, tainted by the dark bargain I'd unwittingly made. Please, I thought, unable to speak the words aloud. I just want to be free. The fire crackled in response, as if it could hear my thoughts. Freedom comes with a price, Jack. Are you willing to pay it? To give up everything you've gained? I opened my eyes, staring defiantly into the heart of the flames. I tried to nod, to indicate my agreement, but the invisible force still held me rigid. The fire seemed to consider for a moment, its flames dancing in contemplation. Very well, it said at last. Let's see how far you're willing to go to break our deal. Suddenly the force holding me vanished and I stumbled forward, nearly falling into the fire. I caught myself at the last moment scrambling backward away from the flames. Run, Jack, the fire taunted. Run if you can, but know that we will always be with you, always be a part of you. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush with no regard for direction or safety. Branches whipped at my face, roots threatened to trip me, but still I ran on, driven by pure animal instinct to escape. Behind me, I could hear the forest coming alive. Trees groaned and shifted, their roots tearing free of the earth to give chase. Shadows solidified into monstrous shapes, pursuing me with relentless determination. And always, I could hear the whisper of the fire, carried on the wind. You can't escape us, Jack. We're a part of you now. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. But no matter how far or how fast I ran, the sounds of pursuit never faded. The forest itself seemed to be conspiring against me, trees shifting to block my path, vines reaching out to snare my feet. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, when my body was ready to collapse from exhaustion, I saw a glimmer of light ahead. Dawn was breaking, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the canopy. No! The fire's voice howled, suddenly sounding distant and weak. It's not time yet! Hope surged through me, giving me a final burst of energy. I pushed forward, breaking through the tree line into a small clearing. As the sunlight washed over me, I felt the oppressive presence that had been hounding me begin to fade. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath, my whole body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of the forest settling, returning to its natural state. The monstrous shadows retreated, the animated trees stilled. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I slowly got to my feet, looking around warily. The clearing was peaceful now, showing no signs of the supernatural horror I'd just escaped. But I knew better than to trust appearances. Is it over? I wondered aloud, my voice hoarse and shaky. As if in answer, a gentle breeze rustled through the clearing, carrying with it a final whisper. This isn't over, Jack. The sun may have weakened us, but we are still here, still a part of you. We will be waiting when darkness falls again. I shuddered, knowing the truth of those words. The bargain I'd made, the dark force I'd unleashed, it wasn't something I could simply run away from. It was a part of me now, for better or worse. But as I stood there in the growing light of day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. I had faced my darkest fears, confronted the guilt and pain I'd buried for so long, and I had survived. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm sunlight on my face. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to smile. Let them wait, I said to myself, a new determination filling me. I'm not the same person I was. I'm not that scared, guilt-ridden boy anymore. Whatever comes next, I'll face it on my own terms. With that resolve, I picked a direction and started walking. I didn't know where I was going or what challenges lay ahead. But I knew one thing for certain. My story was far from over. And this time, I would be the one writing it. As I walked, I could feel the weight of my notebook in my pocket, filled with the dark tales I'd created under the fire's influence. Part of me wanted to destroy it, to burn away all evidence of my ordeal. But another part, a stronger part, knew that those stories were a part of me now. They were born from my pain, my guilt, my fears. but also from my creativity, my imagination. I'll use them, I decided, not as the fire intended, but as a way to exorcise my own demons, to help others face their fears. With each step I took, I felt lighter, more in control. The sun continued to rise, chasing away the last shadows of the night, and as I walked on, leaving the dark forest behind, I began to plan my next story, one of redemption, of facing one's inner darkness and emerging stronger. The fire's whisper still echoed in the back of my mind, a reminder of the pact I'd made. But now, it no longer filled me with dread. Instead, it served as a challenge, a motivation to keep moving forward, to keep writing, to keep fighting. My desperate escape had led me not just out of the forest, but toward a new understanding of myself. And whatever darkness still lurked within me, whatever supernatural forces might still claim a part of my soul, I was ready to face them. The city skyline loomed before me as I stumbled out of the taxi, my legs still weak from my ordeal in the forest. The familiar sights and sounds of urban life felt surreal after the supernatural horror I'd experienced. As I fumbled with my keys at the entrance to my apartment building, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. With trembling hands, I fished it out and saw a barrage of missed calls and messages from my agent, Sarah. Frowning, I hit the callback button as I rode the elevator up to my floor. Sarah answered on the first ring. "Jack, where the hell have you been? I've been trying to reach you for days." I was camping, I mumbled, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. "No cell service. What's going on, Sarah?" There was a moment of silence. Then Sarah's voice came back, bubbling with excitement. "What's going on? Jack, you're a sensation. That manuscript you sent me before you left? It's a bestseller." I froze, my key halfway to the lock of my apartment door. "What? But that's impossible. It wasn't even finished when I left." Sarah laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Well, whatever you did on that camping trip, it worked miracles." The manuscript arrived in my inbox complete and polished 3 days ago. I've never read anything like it, Jack. Dark, visceral, utterly captivating. I rushed it to the publisher, and they fast-tracked it. It hit the shelves yesterday, and it's flying off them. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I pushed open my apartment door. "Sarah, I don't remember finishing it." "Oh, come on, Jack. False modesty doesn't suit you. This is your moment. Enjoy it." Sarah paused, then added in a more serious tone. "Listen, I've got to run to another meeting, but we need to talk about your next book. The publisher is clamoring for more. Can you come by the office tomorrow?" I nodded numbly, then remembered she couldn't see me. Yeah, I'll be there." After hanging up, I stood in the middle of my living room, trying to process what I'd just heard. My eyes fell on my laptop, sitting innocently on the coffee table. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it and found a document I didn't remember creating. The title page read, "Whispers in the Dark," by Jack Harrison. As I scrolled through the pages, my horror grew. The story was mine, unmistakably in my voice, but darker and more terrifying than anything I'd ever written before. Scenes of unspeakable horror unfolded before my eyes, interwoven with deeply personal details from my own life, twisted versions of memories I'd tried to forget. "This can't be happening," I muttered, slamming the laptop shut. But even as I tried to deny it, new ideas began to flood my mind. Vivid, horrifying concepts for stories poured into my consciousness, each more disturbing than the last. My hands itched to write them down, to give form to these terrifying visions. Before I knew it, I was at my desk, my fingers flying over the keyboard. Hours passed in a blur as I wrote feverishly, unable to stop the torrent of words. When I finally came to my senses, the sun was rising, and I had completed 3 short stories and the outline for a new novel. Exhausted but strangely exhilarated, I stumbled to bed, falling into a fitful sleep filled with dark dreams. The next day, I made my way to Sarah's office. my mind still reeling from the events of the past 24 hours. As I entered, Sarah greeted me with a wide smile and a warm hug. "There's my star author," she exclaimed. "Jack, I can't tell you how excited everyone is about your book. The reviews are phenomenal. Listen to this one. Harrison delves into the darkest recesses of the human psyche, emerging with a tale that is as horrifying as it is impossible to put down. They're calling you the new king of horror." I managed a weak smile. That's great, Sarah. But about the new material?" Sarah cut me off, her eyes gleaming. "Oh yes, let's talk about that. I got your email this morning with those new stories. Jack, they're incredible. Even darker and more intense than Whispers in the Dark. How are you producing so much so quickly?" I sank into a chair, my head spinning. "Email? What email?" Sarah frowned, pulling up her computer. "The one you sent at 4:37 this morning. 3 completed short stories and an outline for a new novel, don't you remember?" As she turned the screen towards me, I saw my own words staring back at me. The stories I'd written in my midnight frenzy had somehow found their way to Sarah without any conscious action on my part. I've been having trouble sleeping," I mumbled, trying to cover my confusion and growing fear. "Must have sent it without thinking." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Well, insomnia seems to agree with you creatively. These stories are gold, Jack. Pure gold. The publisher wants to fast-track a collection of your short stories, and they're already excited about the new novel." As Sarah continued to outline the plans for my suddenly skyrocketing career, a sense of dread settled over me. The weight of my supernatural encounter in the forest pressed down on me, and I realized with growing horror the true nature of my gift. "Sarah," I interrupted, my voice shaky, What if I told you I'm not sure I can keep producing like this?" She looked at me, puzzled. "What do you mean, Jack? You're on fire right now. Your imagination is working overtime, creating these incredible, terrifying stories. Why would you want to stop?" I struggled to find the words to explain without sounding insane. "It's just, I'm not sure these stories are really mine. I mean, yes, I'm writing them, but it feels like they're coming from somewhere else, somewhere dark." Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "Jack, listen to me. Every writer goes through moments of self-doubt, especially when they're experiencing a creative surge like this. What you're feeling is normal. These stories are coming from you, from your experiences, your fears, your imagination. They're just flowing more freely now because you've tapped into something powerful." I nodded slowly, wanting to believe her, but the memory of the fire's whispers echoed in my mind. "Your stories, your imagination, your very essence. It all belongs to us now." As I left Sarah's office, my head spinning with plans for book tours, interviews, and writing deadlines, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. My newfound success, the acclaim, the productivity, it all came with a price I wasn't sure I was willing to pay. Back in my apartment, I sat at my desk, staring at the blank document on my computer screen. The cursor blinked invitingly, and I could feel the ideas pressing at the edges of my mind, dark and tempting. "I can control this," I said aloud, trying to convince myself. "I can use this gift on my own terms." But as my fingers touched the keyboard, the floodgates opened once again. Words poured out, scenes of horror and despair taking shape on the screen. I wrote for hours, lost in a fever dream of creativity. When I finally stopped, exhausted and drained, I looked at what I had produced. The story was brilliant, terrifying, and deeply disturbing. It was everything my readers would want and more. It was also a piece of my soul, extracted and laid bare on the page. As I sat there contemplating the Faustian bargain I had unwittingly struck, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Great news! Your book just hit #1 on the NYT bestseller list. We're celebrating tomorrow night. You're a star, Jack." I stared at the message, a mix of elation and dread washing over me. Success, fame, creative fulfillment. Everything I had ever dreamed of was now within my grasp. But the cost was my sanity, my peace of mind, perhaps even my very essence. As the sun set outside my window, casting long shadows across my desk, I made a decision. I would ride this wave, use this dark gift to create something meaningful. Perhaps in doing so, I could find a way to break free from the supernatural force that held sway over me. Or perhaps, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, I would lose myself entirely to the darkness that now fueled my creativity. With a deep breath, I opened a new document and began to write, the words flowing like blood from an open wound. As I wrote, I could almost hear the crackle of that otherworldly fire, feel its heat on my face. The curse was now my gift, and the gift my curse. The soft glow of my laptop screen illuminated the darkened living room as I typed furiously, lost in the grip of another writing frenzy. The clock on the wall ticked past 2 a.m., but time had become meaningless in the face of my ceaseless creativity. My latest novel was taking shape, each word more chilling than the last. As I paused to flex my aching fingers, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned my head sharply, but there was nothing there, just the usual shadows cast by my desk lamp. Shaking my head, I returned to my writing, but the sensation persisted. Every few minutes, I'd catch a glimpse of something dark and formless at the edge of my vision. Each time I tried to look directly at it, it vanished. Get a grip, Jack, I muttered to myself. It's just fatigue. You need sleep. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. This was something more, something sinister. The shadow was growing bolder, lingering longer each time it appeared. Days passed and the shadow became a constant presence in my life. I saw it reflected in windows, lurking in dark corners, always just out of clear sight. My fear grew with each passing hour, and with it, the shadow seemed to gain substance. One night, about a week after the shadow first appeared, I jolted awake in a cold sweat. The room was pitch black, but something felt off. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized with growing horror that my entire apartment was filled with whispers. Countless unseen mouths seemed to be speaking all at once, their voices a cacophony of hisses and murmurs. I couldn't make out individual words, but the overall effect was terrifying. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Show yourself." The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I fumbled for the bedside lamp, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the switch. When light finally flooded the room, the whispers ceased abruptly. But the silence that followed was short-lived. A low chuckle emanated from the darkest corner of the room, a sound that sent chills down my spine. As I watched, paralyzed with fear, the shadows in that corner began to coalesce, taking on a more solid form. "Hello, Jack," a familiar voice said, the same voice I'd heard in the campfire all those weeks ago. "Did you miss me?" Before my eyes, the entity revealed itself fully. It was a nightmarish sight, a swirling mass of smoke and flame, vaguely humanoid but constantly shifting and changing. Where its face should have been, there was only a gaping maw of fire. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The entity seemed to sense my terror and reveled in it. "Oh, Jack," it said, its voice a mix of amusement and hunger. "Your fear is delicious, almost as delicious as your stories." I managed to find my voice, though it came out as little more than a whisper. What are you?" The entity's form rippled as if laughing. "I am many things, Jack. I am the spark of creativity that burns within you. I am the darkness you try to hide. I am the price of your success." It moved closer, and I could feel the heat emanating from its fiery form. "But most importantly, I am here to collect what you owe." My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. "The pact," I said, realization dawning. "The deal I made as a child." "Yes," the entity hissed, pleased. "You remember now. The guilt you wanted to forget, the pain you wanted to escape. You traded it all away for success, for the ability to write stories that would captivate the world." I shook my head, desperation rising within me. But I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a kid. The entity's form pulsed, growing larger. Ignorance doesn't negate a contract, Jack. You've reaped the benefits of our deal. Your books topped the bestseller lists. Your name is known worldwide. And now, it's time to pay your debt. A terrible thought occurred to me. My soul, I whispered. You've come to take my soul. The entity made a sound that might have been laughter. Oh, Jack, your soul has been mine since the moment you shook my hand in those woods. What I've come to claim is something far more precious. It moved closer still, its fiery maw inches from my face. I've come for your stories, Jack. Every tale you've ever told, every word you've ever written, they're all mine now. No! I cried out, real fear gripping me. You can't take that from me. My stories, they're all I have. Are they? The entity asked, its voice suddenly soft. Or are they what I've given you? Think, Jack. Where do your ideas come from? Those vivid nightmares, those chilling concepts that spring fully formed into your mind, they're not yours. They never were. I wanted to deny it, to fight against what the entity was saying. But deep down, I knew it was true. The flood of creativity I'd experienced since that night in the forest, it had never truly been mine. The entity seemed to sense my realization. Our pact is nearing completion, Jack. Soon, very soon, I will claim what is rightfully mine. And you will be left with nothing but the empty shell of the success you so desperately craved. With those words, the entity began to dissipate, its form breaking apart into wisps of smoke and flickering embers. But before it vanished completely, it spoke one last time. Enjoy your fame while it lasts, Jack, for when I return it will all be over. And then it was gone, leaving me alone in my suddenly too large bedroom, the echo of its words ringing in my ears. For a long time I sat there, trembling, trying to process what had just happened. The entity's visit had shaken me to my core, forcing me to confront the truth I'd been avoiding for so long. My success, my creativity, my entire career, it was all built on a bargain I'd made in a moment of childish desperation. And now the bill had come due. As the first light of dawn began to creep through my windows, I made my way to my desk on shaky legs. My laptop sat there, the cursor blinking on a half-finished page of my latest novel. With trembling hands, I reached out and closed the laptop. For the first time in weeks, I felt no urge to write, no flood of ideas pressing at my mind. The silence in my head was deafening. I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah's number, not caring about the early hour. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy with sleep. Jack, what's wrong? It's not even 6 a.m. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. Sarah, I need to cancel everything. The book tour, the interviews, all of it. I can't write anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was sharp with concern. Jack, what are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke? I wish it was, I said, my voice breaking. But I can't explain, I need some time. Please, Sarah, can you handle this for me? Another pause, then a sigh. All right, Jack. I don't understand what's going on, but I trust you. Take the time you need, but promise me you'll talk to someone, okay? You're starting to worry me. I promised. Though I knew there was no one I could truly talk to about this, who would believe me? After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring at the closed laptop. The entity's words echoed in my mind. Soon, very soon, I will claim what is rightfully mine. I didn't know how much time I had left, or what would happen when the entity returned to collect its due. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep living like this, couldn't keep feeding the darkness with my words. With a sudden burst of determination, I stood up and began to pack a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away. Away from the fame, away from the pressure to create, away from the lingering presence of the entity that had haunted my every waking moment. As I zipped up my bag, I cast one last glance around my apartment. The shadows seemed to writhe and dance in the corners, a reminder that no matter where I went, the entity would always be with me. But for now, at least, I could run. I could try to find a way out of this cursed bargain, a way to reclaim my creativity and my soul. As I stepped out of my apartment and into the early morning light, I felt a mix of fear and hope. The entity had said our pact was nearing completion. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time to change the ending of this story. With that thought, I hailed a taxi and gave the driver an address. The address of the cabin in the Catskill Mountains where this had all begun. If there were answers to be found, they would be there. As the city receded behind me, I closed my eyes, trying to quiet the whispers that still echoed in my mind. The musty scent of old books filled my nostrils as I hunched over yet another arcane tome in the dim light of Madame Zora's Occult Emporium. The shop was cramped, every available surface crammed with crystals, candles, and leather-bound volumes. I'd been here for hours, desperately searching for anything that might help me break the pact. "Find what you're looking for, dearie." Madame Zora's voice startled me. The old woman seemed to materialize out of the shadows, her eyes twinkling with a knowing look that made me uncomfortable. I sighed, closing the book. Not yet. But there has to be something here. Some way to break a supernatural contract. Madame Zora clicked her tongue. Dangerous business, that. Entities don't like to let go of what's theirs. She studied me for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "Wait here." She disappeared into the back of the shop, returning moments later with a slender volume bound in what looked like black snakeskin. "This might have what you seek, but be warned, the price of knowledge can be steep." I took the book with trembling hands, feeling a faint pulse of energy from its cover. "How much?" Madame Zora waved her hand. "No charge. Consider it a gift. But remember, dearie, every gift has strings attached." As I left the shop, clutching the book to my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made another deal I might come to regret. Back in my hotel room, I pored over the book's contents. Most of it was gibberish to me, but one section caught my eye. The Severance Ritual. It promised to sever connections between mortal and otherworldly beings, breaking any pacts or contracts. Hope surged through me, only to be dashed as I read the list of ingredients. Rare herbs, crystals I'd never heard of, and at the center of it all, the tears of a banshee, freely given. I slumped back in my chair, overwhelmed by the impossibility of the task. As night fell, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted into an uneasy sleep. But rest, it seemed, was not to be mine. The entity's voice whispered in my ear, jolting me awake. "Still trying to escape me, Jack? How amusing." I sat up, my heart pounding to find my hotel room transformed. The walls writhed with shadows, and in the corner stood the entity, its form more solid than ever. "What do you want?" I managed to croak out. The entity's fiery maw twisted into what might have been a smile. "To show you your future, Jack. The future you've earned." Suddenly, the room dissolved around me, replaced by a hellish landscape. I saw myself, older, haggard, hunched over a typewriter in a dim, smoke-filled room. Words poured from my fingers onto the page, but they weren't mine. They were dark, twisted things that seemed to squirm on the paper. "This is what awaits you," the entity's voice echoed around me. "An eternity of creation, but not for yourself. Every word, every story, feeding me, strengthening me." The vision shifted, and I saw the world outside. Streets filled with shambling, hollow-eyed people, all of them muttering fragments of stories under their breath. The sky was a roiling mass of smoke and flame, and at the center of it all, a massive version of the entity loomed, drinking in the words, the fear, the creativity of a world gone mad. "This is the world you'll help create, Jack," the entity whispered. "Isn't it beautiful?" I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The hotel room was normal again, but I could still feel the entity's presence lingering in the air. With shaking hands, I reached for the black book. I had to find a way to perform this ritual no matter the cost. The fate of more than just my soul was at stake now. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the task of gathering the ritual components. I scoured New Age shops for the rarer crystals, hiked deep into forests for herbs that only grew in the light of the full moon. Each item crossed off the list felt like a small victory, but the final ingredient, the tears of a banshee, eluded me. How does one even find a banshee, let alone convince her to cry? As I walked down the street, lost in thought, a woman's scream pierced the air. I whirled around, expecting to see some kind of accident or attack. Instead, I saw people going about their business as usual. No one else seemed to have heard the scream. Then I saw her. A pale woman in a flowing white dress, standing in the middle of the sidewalk. Her mouth was open in a silent wail, and tears streamed down her face. A banshee. As I stared transfixed, a businessman walked right through her, not even breaking stride. I blinked and she was gone. Did you see that? I asked a nearby hot dog vendor. He looked at me strangely. See what, buddy? I shook my head, mumbling an apology as I hurried away. But as I walked, I noticed more and more oddities. A child playing with a spectral puppy in the park. A translucent old man sitting on a bench reading a newspaper from the 1940s. And always, glimpses of the entity in reflections and shadows. With growing horror, I realized what was happening. The longer I waited to break the pact, the stronger the entity became. The veil between worlds was thinning, and soon, everyone would be able to see the nightmares that haunted the edges of reality. I redoubled my efforts, scouring the city for any sign of the banshee. Days blurred into nights as I searched, fueled by desperation and cheap coffee. Finally, on the third night, I found her again. She was standing on the roof of an abandoned building, her keening cry echoing across the empty streets. This time, when I approached, she didn't vanish. "Please," I said, holding out a small vial. "I need your help." The banshee turned to me, her eyes filled with an eternity of sorrow. When she spoke, her voice was like the whisper of wind through a graveyard. "Why should I help you, mortal? Your kind has brought nothing but pain to this world." I swallowed hard, then began to speak. I told her everything, the pact I'd made as a child, the entity that haunted me, the visions of a world consumed by madness and fear. As I spoke, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was telling someone the whole truth. When I finished, the banshee was silent for a long moment. Then, to my amazement, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Your story. It reminds me of why I weep. For the pain, the fear, the mistakes that haunt all mortals." She leaned forward, allowing the tear to fall into my vial. "Take it, and may it bring you the peace you seek." With trembling hands, I sealed the vial. "Thank you," I whispered. But when I looked up, the banshee was gone. As I made my way back to my hotel room, vial clutched tightly in my hand, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. I had all the components for the ritual now. Soon, I would face the entity one last time. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Shadows seemed to move at the corners of my vision, and the air felt thick with malevolent energy. The entity knew what I was planning, and it wouldn't go down without a fight. I quickened my pace, knowing that every second counted now. The fate of my soul, and perhaps the fate of the world, hung in the balance. The final confrontation was coming, and I had to be ready. As I reached my hotel, I cast one last look over my shoulder. For a moment, I thought I saw the entity's fiery form reflected in a shop window, its maw twisted in a snarl of rage. Then it was gone, leaving me alone in the night with my racing thoughts and the weight of the ritual components in my bag. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, steeling myself for what was to come. The end game was approaching, and I knew that before the sun rose again, my battle with the entity would reach its climax. Win or lose, by morning, everything would change. The crunch of leaves beneath my feet was the only sound that broke the eerie silence as I made my way through the dense Catskill forest. The familiar path seemed both comforting and menacing, every tree a potential hiding place for the horrors that had haunted me for so long. As I approached the clearing where it had all begun, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt charged, as if the very forest was holding its breath in anticipation. I set my backpack down and began to unpack the ritual components with trembling hands. "You don't have to do this, Jack," a voice whispered on the wind. I whirled around, but there was no one there. Just the trees, their branches swaying gently despite the lack of breeze. I shook my head, trying to clear it. "No more games," I muttered. "This ends today." As I arranged the crystals in a circle and laid out the herbs, the forest around me grew unnaturally quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. It was as if all of nature was retreating, sensing the cosmic battle that was about to unfold. With everything in place, I took a deep breath and opened the black book, its pages seeming to writhe under my gaze. The incantation was complex, a mix of ancient languages and guttural sounds that felt wrong in my mouth. But I had practiced, and I knew what I had to do. As I began to speak, my voice shaking with each syllable, the air grew thick with malevolent energy. The crystals began to glow, pulsing with an otherworldly light. The herbs smoldered, releasing tendrils of sweet-smelling smoke that twisted into unnatural shapes. "Foolish boy," the entity's voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Did you really think you could undo our pact so easily?" The shadows at the edge of the clearing began to coalesce, taking on the familiar, terrifying form of the entity. It was larger than I had ever seen it, its fiery maw twisted into a snarl of rage. I faltered for a moment, nearly losing my place in the incantation. The entity seized on my hesitation, pressing its advantage. "Think of all I've given you, Jack," it purred, its voice now seductive. "The fame, the success, the adoration of millions. Are you really willing to throw that all away?" Images flashed before my eyes, my books on bestseller lists, crowds cheering at my readings, my bank account swelling with royalties. For a moment I wavered, but then I remembered the cost, the nightmares, the loss of control, the gradual erosion of my very self, and worse, the visions of a world consumed by the entity's hunger. "No," I said, my voice growing stronger. "No more." I resumed the incantation, my words cutting through the entity's illusions. It roared in frustration, its form rippling with barely contained fury. "You ungrateful wretch," it howled. "I made you what you are." Tendrils of darkness shot out from the entity, whipping around me like angry snakes. I felt them trying to penetrate my mind to strip away my resolve. But I pressed on, each word of the ritual a shield against its assault. As I neared the end of the incantation, I reached for the final component, the vial containing the Banshee's tear. The entity's eyes widened in recognition and fear. "No!" it shrieked. "You don't know what you're doing." I uncorked the vial, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "I'm taking back my life." With those words, I upended the vial, letting the single glistening tear fall onto the smoldering herbs. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. A blinding light erupted from the circle of crystals, so bright it seared my vision even through closed eyelids. The entity howled in pain and rage, its form seeming to fracture and splinter in the face of the ritual's power. "You cannot undo what has been done," it screamed, its voice distorting into something inhuman and terrifying. "We are bound, you and I, forever." I felt something deep within me begin to tear, as if the very fabric of my soul was being ripped apart. The pain was excruciating, unlike anything I had ever experienced. But still, I forced myself to continue, shouting the final words of the incantation over the entity's howls. By the power of earth and sky, by the tears of the eternal mourner, I sever this bond. I reclaim what was taken. I am my own, now and forevermore. The entity lunged for me. Its fiery maw opened wide to swallow me whole. But it was too late. As the final word left my lips, there was a deafening crack, like the sound of the world splitting in two. The entity's form exploded into a million motes of darkness and flame, swirling around me in a maelstrom of otherworldly energy. I felt it tearing at me, trying to maintain its hold, but the power of the ritual was too strong. With a final, earth-shattering shriek, the entity was ripped away from me. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath as the swirling chaos was sucked into a point of absolute darkness at the center of the ritual circle. For a moment, all was silent and still. Then, with a soft pop, the darkness vanished, leaving behind nothing but a scorched patch of earth where the herbs had been. I remained on my knees, panting heavily, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. Slowly, cautiously, I reached out with my senses, searching for any lingering trace of the entity's presence. There was nothing. The oppressive weight that had burdened me for so long was gone. I felt lighter, cleaner somehow, as if a poison had been purged from my system. As the realization of what I had accomplished began to sink in, a laugh bubbled up from deep within me. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a full-bodied roar of relief and joy. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, until my sides ached and I could barely breathe. When I finally regained my composure, I noticed that the forest had come back to life around me. Birds sang in the trees, small animals rustled in the underbrush. The world felt normal again. I gathered up the remnants of the ritual components, carefully wrapping the crystals and stowing them in my backpack. The black book I left where it lay, somehow knowing that its purpose had been fulfilled. As I stood to leave, a gentle breeze rustled through the clearing, carrying with it a whisper that might have been my imagination. "Well done, Jack, you're free now." I smiled, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. "Thank you," I whispered back, not sure who or what I was thanking, but feeling grateful nonetheless. As I made my way back down the mountain, my mind was already racing with ideas. Not the dark, twisted concepts that had plagued me under the entity's influence, but stories of hope, of redemption, of the strength of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I had built a career on the darkness the entity had fed me, and my readers would expect more of the same. But I was determined to forge a new path, to use my gift for storytelling to inspire rather than terrify. As I reached the base of the mountain, I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. It was time to face the real world again, to begin the process of rebuilding my life and my career on my own terms. "Jack?" Sarah's voice was a mix of relief and concern. "Where have you been? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, feeling a smile spread across my face. "I'm better than okay, Sarah. I'm free, and I've got one hell of a story to tell you." As I began to explain, leaving out the supernatural details for now, I felt a surge of excitement for the future. The entity was gone, the pact was broken, and my story, my real story, was just beginning. The sun was setting as I finished my conversation with Sarah, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. As I looked up at the beautiful display, I felt a renewed appreciation for the world around me, for the simple joys of being alive and in control of my own destiny. I had faced my demons, quite literally, and come out the other side stronger for it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I could face them on my own terms, with my creativity as a tool for good rather than a conduit for darkness. With a light heart and a clear mind, I set off towards the nearest town, ready to begin the next chapter of my life. As the final echoes of the ritual faded away, I felt a moment of pure elation. I had done it. I had broken the pact, banished the entity, and reclaimed my life. But that moment of triumph was short-lived. A deafening crack filled the air, like the sound of a glacier splitting in two. I looked up, expecting to see storm clouds gathering, but what I saw instead froze the blood in my veins. The sky itself was fracturing, hairline cracks spreading across the blue expanse like a spider web. "No," I whispered, a dawning horror settling over me. This can't be happening. But it was. All around me, the world began to splinter and break apart. Trees shattered into countless fragments, each shard containing a miniature version of the forest. The ground beneath my feet crumbled, revealing a yawning void beneath. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Every direction I turned, reality was falling away. In desperation, I closed my eyes, as if by shutting out the sight I could make it stop. When I opened them again, I was falling. The void I tumbled through was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was darkness and light, silence and cacophony, everything and nothing all at once. As I fell, I saw fragments of my life flash by, like shards of a broken mirror. There I was as a child, sitting by my sister's hospital bed, making that fateful wish. In another fragment, I saw myself at my first book signing, basking in the adoration of fans. Yet another showed me hunched over my laptop, pouring out dark tales under the entity's influence. This isn't real, I told myself, trying to make sense of the madness around me. It can't be real. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. This was more real than anything I had ever experienced. The ritual hadn't just broken my pact with the entity, it had shattered the very fabric of my reality. As if summoned by my realization, I heard the entity's roar echoing through the void. It was a sound of pure rage and frustration, shaking the fragments of reality around me. "Did you think you could escape me so easily, Jack?" Its voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Our pact may be broken, but I am not so easily banished." I saw it then, a writhing mass of darkness and flame, twisting through the void in pursuit of me. It was larger than ever, its form unconstrained by the laws of physical reality. "Stay away from me," I shouted, my voice lost in the chaos of the void. As if in response to my fear, my fall suddenly changed direction. Instead of plummeting downward, I found myself hurtling sideways, tumbling through an ever-changing landscape of memories and possibilities. I saw moments from my past, playing out in vivid detail, but they were different, changed. In one fragment, I saw myself as a teenager, turning down the entity's offer in the forest. "No," that version of me said firmly. "I won't trade my sister's memory for success. I'll find my own way." The scene shifted, and I saw an older version of myself, still writing but with a different style. The books on the shelves behind him were thrillers, mysteries, stories of human drama rather than supernatural horror. Is this what could have been? I wondered aloud. "Yes," the entity's voice hissed, closer now. "See what you gave up, Jack? The life you could have had without me?" I felt a surge of anger at its words. "A life you stole from me," I shouted into the void. The entity's laughter shook the fragments around me. "Stole? I gave you everything, Jack. Fame, fortune, the power to touch millions with your words. And this is how you repay me?" As it spoke, I saw more fragments of my life under the entity's influence. The bestsellers, the movie deals, the adoring fans. But I also saw the toll it had taken, the nightmares, the paranoia, the gradual loss of my own identity. "No," I said, my voice growing stronger. "You didn't give me anything. You twisted my gift, turned it into something dark and destructive, but no more." With those words, I felt something change within me. The helpless tumbling through the void stopped, and suddenly, I felt in control. The entity sensed the change too. Its roar of frustration echoed through the fractured reality. "You cannot undo what has been done, Jack. Your choice was made long ago." But even as it spoke, I saw something in the chaos around me. a thin golden thread barely visible amidst the swirling fragments of reality. Somehow, I knew what it was. A lifeline to a different path. A reality where I had never made the pact. The entity saw it too. "No!" it howled, lunging towards me with terrifying speed. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the entity's fiery maw opening wide, ready to swallow me whole. I saw the golden thread, tantalizingly close yet seemingly out of reach, and I saw my own hand, stretching out into the void. In that moment, I made a choice, not out of fear or desperation like I had as a child, but with clear-eyed determination. I chose my own path. With a burst of willpower I didn't know I possessed, I reached out and grasped the golden thread. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. A blinding light filled the void, so bright it seared away the fragments of broken reality. The entity's howl of rage was cut off abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. For a moment that felt like an eternity. There was nothing. No sight, no sound, no sensation. Just pure, empty whiteness. Then, slowly, the world began to reform around me. I found myself standing in a familiar room, my old bedroom from when I was a teenager. Posters of my favorite bands adorned the walls, and a stack of well-worn books sat on the nightstand. For a moment I thought I had somehow been transported back in time. But as I looked down at my hands, I saw they were still those of an adult. This wasn't time travel. It was something else entirely. A knock at the door startled me out of my confusion. "Jack," a voice called, a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Are you up? Breakfast is ready." My heart nearly stopped. It was my mother's voice. With trembling hands, I opened the door, and there she was, looking exactly as I remembered her from my teen years. She smiled at me, but then her expression changed to one of concern. "Jack, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. Tears welled up in my eyes as I pulled her into a tight hug. She returned the embrace, patting my back gently. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked softly. I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "Nothing's wrong, Mom. Everything's perfect." She gave me a puzzled look but didn't press further. "Well, come on down when you're ready. Your sister's already at the table complaining that we're letting you sleep in." My sister, alive. The realization hit me like a physical blow. As my mother headed downstairs, I turned back to my room, trying to make sense of what had happened. The entity, the pact, my entire career as a horror writer, had it all been a dream? But no, I could still remember it all vividly. The years of success tainted by supernatural influence, the struggle to break free, the shattering of reality itself. It had been real. All of it. Somehow, against all odds, I had grasped that golden thread and pulled myself into a different reality. A reality where I had never made the pact, where my sister had survived, where my life had taken an entirely different path. As I made my way downstairs, still in a daze, I caught sight of myself in a mirror. I looked younger, unburdened by the years of guilt and fear that had aged me in my other life. But my eyes were the same. The eyes of someone who had seen too much, who had faced darkness and emerged stronger for it. I entered the kitchen, and there she was. My sister, alive and well, rolling her eyes at me dramatically. "Finally, I thought you were going to sleep all day." I couldn't help it. I burst into tears again, pulling her into a hug that probably confused her terribly. But I didn't care. She was here. She was alive. And I had been given a second chance. As I sat down at the breakfast table, surrounded by the family I had lost and regained, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The entity was gone, banished to the shattered remnants of the reality I had left behind. The pact was undone, my soul my own again. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. I had memories of a life unlived, knowledge of horrors that had never come to pass in this reality. Integrating back into this world, this life, would be a challenge. But as I looked around at my family, alive and whole, I knew it was a challenge I was more than willing to face. I had been given a rare gift, the chance to rewrite my own story. And this time I was determined to make it a tale of hope, of love, of the triumph of the human spirit over darkness. As I picked up my fork, ready to enjoy a family breakfast for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I silently vowed to make the most of this second chance. The transition was jarring, disorienting. One moment, I was sitting at the breakfast table with my family, my sister alive, my past rewritten. The next, I was blinking awake in the dim light of a dying campfire, the scent of pine and smoke filling my nostrils. For a long moment, I simply sat there, trying to process what had happened. Had it all been a dream? The shattering of reality? The glimpse of an alternate life? Had my mind conjured it all as some sort of coping mechanism? But no. As I looked around the familiar clearing in the Catskill Mountains, I knew that what I had experienced was real. The memories of both timelines resided within me, clear and vivid. I had lived 2 lives, faced my demons in multiple realities, and somehow found my way back to where it all began. The fire crackled, drawing my attention. As I watched, the flames seemed to twist and grow, taking on an all too familiar shape. So, the entity's voice hissed, weaker than before but still dripping with malice. You thought you could escape me so easily? I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. The entity emerged from the fire, its form smaller and less defined than I remembered. It flickered and wavered, as if struggling to maintain its presence in our world. You're still here, I said, surprised to find my voice steady. But you're different. The entity's fiery maw twisted into what might have been a snarl. Your little adventure through realities weakened me, yes. But I am not so easily banished, Jack. Our pact still stands. I shook my head, a newfound confidence flowing through me. No, it doesn't. I've seen what life could be like without you. I've felt what it's like to be free of your influence. The pact is broken. Foolish boy, the entity growled, its form pulsing with anger. You cannot simply wish away a bargain with forces beyond your comprehension. The price must be paid. As it spoke, I felt a familiar pressure building in my mind. The urge to write, to create, to pour out dark tales onto the page. But this time, I recognized it for what it was. The entity's last desperate attempt to maintain its hold on me. No, I said firmly, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath. I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. The entity roared in frustration, the sound shaking the trees around us. You are mine, Jack. Your stories, your creativity, your very soul, they belong to me. I opened my eyes, meeting the entity's fiery gaze without flinching. You're wrong. My creativity, my stories, they were always mine. You just twisted them, fed off them, but no more. As I spoke, I felt a change coming over me. The fear that had dominated my life for so long was fading, replaced by a deep, unshakable certainty. I had faced this entity across multiple realities, had seen the life I could have had without its influence. I knew who I was now, who I could be. I am Jack Harrison, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. I am a writer, a storyteller. But I am not your puppet, not your source of power. I am my own person, and I choose my own path. The entity lunged at me, its fiery form stretching across the clearing. But as it reached for me, it seemed to hit an invisible barrier. It recoiled, hissing in pain and frustration. What is this? It snarled. What have you done? I smiled, feeling a surge of power coursing through me. Not the dark, corrupting power the entity had offered, but something purer, stronger. The power of self-knowledge, of free will. I've made my choice, I said simply, and I choose to be free of you. The entity howled, its form beginning to fracture and splinter. You cannot escape me, Jack. I am a part of you. No, I replied calmly. You were never a part of me. You were a parasite, feeding off my fear and guilt. But I'm not afraid anymore, and I won't let guilt define me. As I spoke, I began to walk forward, step by deliberate step. The entity retreated, its fiery form shrinking and flickering. "What are you doing?" it hissed, a note of panic entering its voice. "Stay back." But I didn't stop. With each step I felt stronger, more certain. Memories flashed through my mind. My sister's smile in the alternate reality, the joy of writing stories untainted by darkness, the simple pleasure of a family breakfast. These were the things that truly mattered, the experiences that made life worth living. "I banish you," I said, my voice ringing with authority. "Back to whatever realm you came from. You have no power here anymore." The entity let out a final, ear-splitting shriek. Its form collapsed in on itself, becoming a swirling vortex of flame and shadow. I felt a pull, as if it was trying to drag me in with it. But I stood my ground, rooted in the strength of my conviction. "Goodbye," I whispered, as the vortex grew smaller and smaller. "And good riddance." With a sound like thunder, the vortex imploded. A shockwave of energy rippled out across the clearing, extinguishing the campfire and leaving me in darkness. For a long moment I stood there, heart pounding, ears ringing in the sudden silence. Then, slowly, I became aware of a change in the air. The oppressive weight that had hung over the clearing was gone. The forest around me seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw the first faint light of dawn breaking through the trees. A new day was beginning, and with it, a new chapter in my life. I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just transpired. Tears streamed down my face, tears of relief, of joy, of release. For the first time in years, I felt truly, completely free. As the sun rose, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold, I slowly got to my feet. My body ached, as if I had fought a physical battle rather than a spiritual one. But my mind was clear, my heart light. I gathered my belongings, packing away the camping gear with methodical care. As I worked, I allowed my mind to wander, exploring the possibilities that now lay before me. I was still a writer. That much hadn't changed. The urge to tell stories, to weave words into worlds, was as strong as ever. But now, those stories would be my own. Not dark tales born of supernatural influence, but stories that reflected the full spectrum of human experience. Joy and sorrow, love and loss, hope and redemption. As I shouldered my backpack and prepared to leave the clearing, I paused for a moment, looking back at the extinguished campfire. In a way, it represented the end of a chapter in my life. The pact was broken, the entity banished. The long nightmare was over. But as I turned to go, I realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was also a beginning. I took out my notebook, the same one I had used to write so many horror stories under the entity's influence. For a moment, I considered throwing it away, erasing all evidence of that dark period in my life. But then I thought better of it. Instead, I opened it to a fresh page and began to write. The sun rose over the mountains, its light chasing away the last shadows of night. As I stood there, watching the new day dawn, I felt as if I too was being reborn. The darkness that had clouded my vision for so long was gone, burned away in the crucible of my trials. I had faced my fears, confronted the demons of my past, both literal and metaphorical, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, more whole. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I looked forward to the journey. For I knew now that the greatest stories, the most powerful tales, come not from external forces or supernatural bargains, but from the depths of the human heart. And my heart, battered but unbroken, was full of stories waiting to be told. I closed the notebook, a sense of peace settling over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them on my own terms. The entity was gone, the pact was broken, and my story, my real story, was just beginning. As I made my way down the mountain trail, I felt the warm sunlight on my face and smiled. The world seemed brighter somehow, full of possibilities. I was Jack Harrison, writer and storyteller, and I was finally truly free. The sound of my footsteps on the forest path mingled with the chorus of birdsong and the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. It was the sound of a new beginning, the opening notes of a story yet to be written, and as I walked on, leaving behind the site of my greatest trial and triumph, I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. The entity was gone, but the magic of storytelling remained, and this time I would use that magic to illuminate the world, not to darken it. With each step, I moved further from my past and closer to my future. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its light filling the world with promise. And I, Jack Harrison, reborn in the flames of adversity, walked on to meet it. The wheels of my old Subaru crunched on the gravel as I pulled into the small parking area at the edge of the White Mountain National Forest. I cut the engine, and for a moment, I just sat there, letting the silence envelop me. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of city life I'd left behind in Boston. I took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp mountain air that seeped through the crack in my window. The scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs, instantly calming my nerves. This was it, my great escape, my chance to reconnect with nature and hopefully reignite my passion for painting. "Okay, Olivia," I muttered to myself, "time to face the great outdoors." I stepped out of the car, stretching my legs after the long drive. The forest loomed before me, a sea of green punctuated by the stark white trunks of birch trees. It was beautiful, serene, and yet there was something else, a stillness that felt almost unnatural. I shook off the feeling, chalking it up to city girl jitters. "You're just not used to the quiet anymore," I reassured myself as I started unloading my gear from the trunk. The weight of my easel and paint box was comforting as I made my way to a small clearing near the edge of the woods. It was the perfect spot, offering a sweeping view of the valley below and the distant mountains beyond. I set up my equipment with practiced ease, my fingers itching to capture the landscape before me. As I squeezed out my first dollop of paint onto the palette, a chill ran down my spine. I froze, brush hovering over the canvas. Something wasn't right. I looked up, scanning the trees around me. Everything seemed normal, and yet, the shadows, they were moving. I blinked hard, certain I must be seeing things. The trees stood motionless, not even a whisper of wind to rustle their leaves, but their shadows danced and swayed on the forest floor, completely independent of their sources. "What the hell?" I whispered, my heart beginning to race. I took a step back from my easel, nearly tripping over my paint box. The shadows continued their eerie ballet, stretching and contracting in ways that defied logic and physics. "Hey!" I called out, my voice sounding small and scared in the vast stillness of the forest. "Is someone there? Is this some kind of trick?" Only silence answered me. The shadows kept moving, and now I could swear I saw shapes forming within them. Faces, perhaps, or reaching hands. My breath came in short gasps as I stumbled backward, unable to tear my eyes away from the impossible scene before me. "This isn't real," I told myself firmly. "You're tired from the drive. You're seeing things." But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the shadows continued their unnatural dance. I felt watched, as if 100 unseen eyes were fixed upon me. The urge to flee was overwhelming. With shaking hands, I began to pack up my supplies. My easel collapsed with a clatter that seemed to echo through the unnaturally still forest. As I shoved my paints haphazardly into their box, I could have sworn I heard whispers on the non-existent breeze, soft, pleading voices just at the edge of hearing. "Nope, nope, nope," I chanted under my breath, gathering my things as quickly as I could. "This is not happening. I'm going back to the cabin, and everything will be fine." I practically ran back to my car, tossing my equipment into the trunk with little care for its organization. As I slammed the trunk shut, I cast one last glance at the clearing. The shadows had stilled, looking as innocent and normal as they should. But I knew what I had seen. The drive to my rented cabin was a blur. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, constantly checking my rearview mirror, as if expecting the anomalous shadows to be chasing me down the winding mountain road. By the time I pulled up to the small rustic cabin, my nerves were completely frayed. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me and drawing all the curtains. The cabin was cozy, all warm wood and quaint furnishings, but right now it felt like a fortress, a barrier between me and whatever was out there in the forest. "Get it together, Olivia," I said aloud, trying to steady myself. "There has to be a logical explanation." I paced the small living area, running through possibilities in my mind. A trick of the light? Some kind of local phenomenon? Or was I simply losing it? As night fell, I found myself huddled on the couch, sketchbook in hand. I hadn't meant to draw anything, but as I looked down, I realized I'd been sketching absent-mindedly. The page was filled with twisting, writhing shadows, and in their midst, a pair of pleading eyes. A chill ran through me as I recognized those eyes. They were the same ones I'd glimpsed in the moving shadows at the clearing. "What are you?" I whispered, tracing the lines of the sketch with a trembling finger. As if in response, I heard a soft whisper. I jumped, looking around wildly, but the cabin was empty. The whisper came again, seeming to emanate from the very shadows cast by my reading lamp. "Help us," it seemed to say. "Free us." I slammed the sketchbook shut and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a thud and fell to the floor, pages splayed open. Even from across the room, I could see the eyes in my sketch staring back at me. "This isn't happening," I said firmly, but my voice quavered. "I'm going to bed, and when I wake up, everything will be normal." But as I lay in bed that night, listening to the creaks and groans of the cabin settling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my world. The shadows I'd seen, the whispers I'd heard, they were trying to tell me something. And deep down, I knew that my peaceful artist's retreat had just become something far more mysterious and terrifying. As I finally drifted off into an uneasy sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. What had I gotten myself into, and how deep did this rabbit hole go? Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about art, reality, and the thin veil between the world of the living and something far beyond. The first rays of dawn filtered through the cabin's curtains, gently rousing me from a fitful sleep. For a moment, I lay still, trying to convince myself that yesterday's events had been nothing more than a vivid nightmare. But as consciousness fully took hold, the memory of those shifting shadows came rushing back, all too real and undeniable. I sat up, rubbing my eyes and steeling myself for the day ahead. "Get it together, Olivia," I muttered. "You're here to paint, not chase shadows." As I shuffled to the kitchen to make coffee, something caught my eye through the window. My heart nearly stopped. There, bathed in the soft morning light, stood my easel. Outside, where I definitely hadn't left it. "No," I whispered, pressing my face against the cool glass. "No, no, no." I threw on a robe and rushed outside, my bare feet cold against the dewy grass. The easel stood proudly in the clearing, a canvas perched upon it as if waiting for me. But I hadn't brought any canvas out here. I approached slowly, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. As I drew closer, I could see that the canvas wasn't blank. A painting adorned its surface, a painting I had no memory of creating. Dark, swirling shadows dominated the image, but as I stared, transfixed, I realized there was more. From within the inky blackness, a figure was emerging. "This isn't possible," I breathed, reaching out a trembling hand to touch the still wet paint. The moment my fingers made contact with the canvas, the figure seemed to move. I jerked my hand back with a gasp. The shadowy form was becoming clearer now, taking on a more human-like shape. And then, to my utter disbelief, it raised an arm and beckoned to me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. "Who?" What are you? I called out, my voice shaking. The figure didn't respond, at least not with words. But I felt something, a pull, an irresistible urge to follow it. My feet began to move of their own accord, taking me towards the edge of the forest. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to stop, to run back to the safety of the cabin, but my body wasn't listening. Please, I whimpered, fighting against the invisible force drawing me in. I don't understand what's happening. Just as I was about to step into the tree line, a gust of wind whipped through the clearing. It snapped me out of my trance-like state, and suddenly I could move freely again. I didn't waste a second. I turned and ran, sprinting back to the cabin as fast as my legs could carry me. I slammed the door behind me, fumbling with the lock. Once secure, I slid down to the floor, my back against the door, gasping for breath. "This can't be real," I said to the empty cabin. "I'm losing my mind, that's the only explanation." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The wet paint on my fingers was proof enough that what I'd seen was no hallucination. I spent the rest of the day huddled inside, jumping at every creak and groan of the old cabin. I tried to distract myself, reading, sketching, anything to keep my mind off what had happened. But my thoughts kept drifting back to that haunting figure and the overwhelming pull I had felt. As evening approached, I found myself pacing, debating what to do. Should I pack up and leave? But where would I go? And what if whatever was out there followed me? Maybe I should try to communicate with it, I mused aloud, then immediately shook my head. No, that's crazy talk, Olivia. You don't communicate with whatever that was. The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the cabin into darkness save for the warm glow of my reading lamp. I curled up on the couch, wrapping myself in a blanket as if it could shield me from the inexplicable events of the past 2 days. That's when I heard it. A whisper, so faint I thought I might have imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time. "Help us." I bolted upright, eyes darting around the room. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Free us," came another whisper, seeming to emanate from the very shadows cast by my lamp. I scrambled to turn on more lights, but it didn't help. The whispers continued, growing in number until it sounded like a chorus of ethereal voices pleading for aid. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The shadows on the wall began to shift and swirl, much like they had in the forest. Shapes formed within them, faces twisted in anguish, hands reaching out desperately. "Trapped," one voice said, clearer than the others. "We are trapped between worlds." My artist's eye couldn't help but be captivated by the fluidity of the shadows, the way they moved and changed. Without thinking, I reached for my sketchbook and began to draw. As my pencil flew across the page, the whispers grew more excited. "Yes," they seemed to say. "This is how you can help us." I drew for what felt like hours, capturing the ever-changing shadows and the figures within them. With each sketch, I felt a strange connection growing, a sense that I was doing something important, something necessary. When I finally set down my pencil, exhausted, I looked up to find the shadows had stilled. The whispers had faded to a gentle murmur, almost soothing now. "Thank you," came a soft voice from the shadows. "You have taken the first step." "The first step to what?" I asked, but there was no response. There, the shadows were just shadows again, and the room was silent. I looked down at my sketchbook, filled now with pages of haunting drawings. Each one seemed to pulse with a life of its own, telling stories of loss, of being trapped, of yearning for freedom. As the adrenaline of the encounter faded, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. There was no denying it now. Something extraordinary was happening, and somehow, I was at the center of it. "Okay," I said to myself, a newfound determination in my voice. "If this is real, and I'm pretty sure it is, then I need to figure out what's going on. These beings, spirits, whatever they are, they need help. And for some reason, They think I can provide it. I stood up, stretching my cramped muscles, and walked to the window. The forest outside was dark and still, but I no longer felt the overwhelming fear I had earlier. Instead, I felt a sense of purpose. I came here to paint, I said, touching the cool glass. I never expected to be painting for lost souls. But if that's what I need to do, then that's what I'll do. As if in response to my declaration, I felt a gentle warmth spread through me. The shadows in the room seemed to ripple with approval. I turned back to my sketchbook, flipping through the pages of shadowy figures. First thing tomorrow, I promised them, we'll go back to that clearing, and we'll start unraveling this mystery together. As I crawled into bed that night, my mind was buzzing with questions and possibilities. But unlike the night before, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with my paints and a determination to help these lost souls find peace. The morning sun had barely crested the mountains when I climbed into my Subaru. Determination set like steel in my gut. The events of the past 2 days swirled in my mind, a maelstrom of impossible shadows and pleading whispers. I needed answers, and I knew just where to start looking. The drive into town was a blur of winding roads and autumnal colors. I barely registered the picturesque scenery, my mind focused solely on the task ahead. As I pulled into the small parking lot of the local library, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever I might discover. The library was a quaint, 2-story building that looked like it had been plucked straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. A bell chimed softly as I pushed open the heavy wooden door, the scent of old books and leather enveloping me like a comforting blanket. An elderly librarian looked up from her desk, pushing her glasses up her nose as she regarded me with a gentle smile. "Good morning, dear. Can I help you find anything?" I approached the desk, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, actually. I'm looking for information on the history of the area, particularly anything related to unusual occurrences in the forest." The librarian's eyebrows rose slightly. "Unusual occurrences? Well, you've certainly come to the right place. We have quite a collection of local history and folklore. Follow me." She led me to a section in the back of the library, gesturing to several shelves packed with old books and binders. "You'll find everything from official town records to collections of local legends here. Is there anything specific you're looking for?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain without sounding crazy. "I'm particularly interested in any stories about moving shadows or people going missing in the forest." A knowing look crossed the librarian's face. "Ah, I see. Well, you're not the first to come asking about such things. Why don't you start with these?" She pulled out a few dusty volumes and a binder filled with newspaper clippings. "Thank you," I said gratefully, settling down at a nearby table. Hours passed as I pored over the materials. The more I read, the more my unease grew. There were dozens of accounts of hikers and campers going missing in the White Mountain National Forest, many more than I would have expected. Some were found, confused, and unable to explain where they'd been. Others were never seen again. But it was the less official accounts that really caught my attention. Folktales spoke of shadow people lurking in the woods, of trees that moved when no wind blew, of hikers feeling an inexplicable pull deeper into the forest. As I flipped through the binder of newspaper clippings, my heart nearly stopped. There, in a yellowed clipping from 1952, was a photograph of a painting that could have been a twin to the one I'd found on my easel just yesterday. The headline read, "Local artist vanishes, leaves behind mysterious artwork." I quickly scanned the article, my hands shaking slightly. Renowned landscape painter Edward Holloway disappeared last week while on a painting expedition in the White Mountain National Forest. Search parties have found no trace of the artist, save for his campsite and a single, uncanny painting left on his easel. Witnesses describe the painting as unsettling and otherworldly, depicting shadowy figures emerging from a dark forest. Most strangely, some claim the figures in the painting appear to move when observed for extended periods. Find something interesting? I jumped at the librarian's voice, not having heard her approach. She was looking at the newspaper clipping with a mixture of curiosity and what seemed like apprehension. "This painter," I said, tapping the article. "Edward Holloway. Do you know anything more about him?" The librarian sighed, pulling up a chair. "Edward Holloway. Now there's a name I haven't heard in years. It's become something of a local legend, you know." "Please," I urged, "tell me everything you know." She settled into her chair, her eyes taking on a distant look. Edward was a brilliant artist known for his vibrant landscapes. But he always felt there was something more out there, something he wasn't quite capturing in his work. In the summer of 1952, he ventured into the deepest part of the forest, determined to find whatever it was he was missing. She paused, glancing at the newspaper clipping. He never came back. They found his campsite a week later, everything untouched except for that painting on his easel. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Dark, twisted, full of shadows that seemed to writhe and move when you looked at them too long. A chill ran down my spine. It sounded exactly like the painting I'd found on my own easel. "What happened to the painting?" I asked. The librarian shook her head. "No one knows. It was brought into town as evidence, but it vanished from the sheriff's office that very night. Some say it was stolen. Others—" She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Others say it simply faded away into nothing but shadow." I sat back, my mind reeling. It was too similar, too close to my own experiences to be coincidence. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "This has been incredibly helpful." The librarian nodded, standing up. "Just be careful, dear. The forest holds many secrets. Not all of them are meant to be uncovered." As she walked away, I gathered my notes, my head spinning with all I'd learned. I needed fresh air to think. I stepped out of the library into the late afternoon sun, blinking as my eyes adjusted to the brightness. As I stood on the steps, processing everything I'd discovered, a movement caught my eye. My shadow, cast long by the setting sun, was behaving strangely. As people walked by, their shadows intersecting with mine, I could have sworn I saw my shadow reach out, trying to touch theirs. I gasped, stumbling backwards. A passing woman gave me an odd look. "Are you all right, miss?" I nodded quickly, unable to speak. As she continued on her way, I saw my shadow's hand brush against hers. The woman shivered suddenly, wrapping her arms around herself as she hurried away. My heart was pounding as I practically ran to my car. Once inside, I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. "What is happening to me?" I whispered to the empty car. As if in response, I felt a now familiar whisper in the back of my mind. "You're awakening," it seemed to say. "You're beginning to see." I started the car with shaking hands, my mind made up. I wasn't going to run away from this. Whatever was happening, whatever connection I had to these shadows and the lost souls within them, I needed to understand it. As I drove back to the cabin, the setting sun casting long shadows across the road, I made a decision. I would return to that clearing in the forest. I would set up my easel and I would paint, and this time I would be ready for whatever emerged from the shadows. Little did I know my journey into the heart of this mystery was only just beginning, and the shadows had much more to show me. The drive back to the cabin was a blur, my mind racing with everything I'd learned at the library. As I pulled up to the small clearing where the cabin stood, the forest seemed to loom larger than ever, shadows stretching towards me like grasping fingers in the fading light. I hurried inside, my arms laden with art supplies. Something was building inside me, an urgency I couldn't explain. My hands trembled as I set up my easel by the large bay window overlooking the woods. "Okay," I whispered to myself, squeezing paint onto my palette. "I'm ready. Show me what you need me to see." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, I felt it. A presence, not quite visible but undeniably there. My hand moved to the canvas of its own accord, brush dancing across the surface with a life of its own. Colors swirled and blended, dark hues dominating the canvas. I painted faster than I ever had before, driven by an unseen force that guided every stroke. Shapes began to emerge from the darkness, twisted trees, reaching branches, and within them, faces. "Who are you?" I murmured, my eyes fixed on the forming image. As if in response, I felt a sudden, profound connection. It was as if I could see through the eyes of the souls trapped in the shadows. Flashes of memory, not my own, flickered through my mind. A young woman, lost on a hiking trail, fear gripping her heart as night fell. An old man wandering too far from his campsite, disoriented and alone. A child, chasing a butterfly deeper and deeper into the woods, never to return. Tears streamed down my face as I painted, each brushstroke capturing their stories, their pain, their longing to be free. "I see you," I choked out. "I feel you. What happened to you?" The memories intensified. I saw the moment each soul became lost, trapped between worlds. The forest had called to them, just as it had called to Edward Holloway all those years ago. But unlike him, they hadn't had the ability to capture what they saw. They became part of it instead, shadows among shadows. My hand moved faster, adding details I couldn't possibly have known. The young woman's favorite necklace, glinting in the spectral light. The old man's weathered hands, reaching out for help that never came. The child's bright eyes wide with wonder even in the darkness. As I painted, I felt something shifting. With each brushstroke, the heavy atmosphere in the cabin seemed to lighten. The oppressive feeling of being watched eased, replaced by a sense of gratitude. "Am I helping you?" I asked the empty room, my voice barely above a whisper. A gentle breeze rustled through the cabin, impossible given that all the windows were closed. It carried with it a chorus of whispers, too faint to make out individual words, but the meaning was clear. Yes, invigorated, I painted with renewed vigor. The canvas came alive before my eyes, shadows swirling and shifting. I could almost see the trapped souls moving within the paint, their forms becoming clearer as I worked. Hours passed, though I hardly noticed. The moon rose high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow through the window. As I added the final brushstrokes, I felt a surge of energy course through me. "It's done," I breathed, stepping back to look at the completed work. The painting was unlike anything I'd ever created. Dark and light intertwined in a complex dance, shadows and highlights blending in impossible ways. And there, emerging from the darkness, were the faces of the lost souls, each one distinct and alive with emotion. As I stared at the canvas, something extraordinary happened. The painted figures began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. They swirled together, merging into a vortex of shadow and light. And then, with a flash that momentarily blinded me, they were gone. I blinked, trying to clear the spots from my vision. When I could see again, I gasped. The painting had changed. Where before there had been tormented faces and reaching hands, now there was a serene forest scene, bathed in soft, welcoming light. A profound sense of relief washed over me, as if a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted. I knew with a certainty I couldn't explain that I had just freed a trapped spirit. Are you still there?" I called out softly. The cabin was silent, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of before. This silence felt peaceful, content. I sank to the floor, exhausted but exhilarated. "I did it," I murmured. "I actually helped them." As the adrenaline faded, questions began to flood my mind. How had I done this? What did it mean? And most importantly, how many more lost souls were out there, waiting for someone to set them free? I stood on shaky legs, moving to the kitchen to make a much-needed cup of coffee. As I waited for the water to boil, I stared out the window at the dark forest. "I understand now," I said softly. "This is why I'm here. This is what my art is meant to do. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. I had stumbled upon a power I didn't fully understand, an ability to bridge the gap between worlds through my paintings. As I sipped my coffee, I began to plan. I would need more supplies, canvases, paints, brushes. I'd need to venture deeper into the forest to seek out more lost souls. And I'd need to be careful. If Edward Holloway's fate was any indication, this path could be dangerous. But I knew I couldn't turn back now. I had seen the relief in those souls as they were freed, felt the lifting of their burden. How could I walk away knowing there were others out there, trapped in suffering? I moved back to the painting, studying it closely. The serene forest scene seemed to glow with an inner light, a stark contrast to the dark, twisted landscape I had initially created. I promise, I whispered to the painting, to the forest, to whatever forces had brought me here. I'll help as many as I can. As if in response, a warm breeze rustled through the cabin, carrying with it the faintest whisper of gratitude. I settled onto the couch, my mind racing with possibilities and plans. Tomorrow, I would venture back into the forest. Tomorrow, I would seek out more lost souls. Tomorrow, I would continue this extraordinary journey I had stumbled upon. As I drifted off to sleep, my dreams were filled with shifting shadows and reaching hands, with bursts of light and the sound of grateful whispers. And through it all, I painted, my dream self working tirelessly to bring peace to the lost and forgotten. In that moment, suspended between waking and dreaming, I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same. I had found my true calling, hidden in the shadows of the White Mountain National Forest. The forest loomed before me, a wall of green pierced by shafts of early morning sunlight. I adjusted the straps of my backpack, heavy with art supplies, and took a deep breath. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. It should have been invigorating, but a sense of trepidation coiled in my stomach. "You can do this, Olivia," I muttered to myself. "They need you." With one last glance at the safety of my cabin, I stepped into the woods. The canopy closed over me, dappling the forest floor with ever-shifting patterns of light and shadow. Those shadows. I watched them carefully now, attuned to their unnatural movements. I hiked for what felt like hours, going deeper into the forest than I'd ever ventured before. The usual sounds of wildlife grew muted, replaced by an eerie stillness. That's when I felt it, a pull, an invisible tug urging me off the trail. Following my instincts, I pushed through a thick patch of undergrowth. The branches seemed to part for me, revealing a small clearing bathed in ethereal light. In the center stood a gnarled old oak, its trunk twisted into an almost human-like form. As I approached, the shadows around the tree began to writhe and coalesce. A face emerged from the darkness, gaunt, eyes wide with a mix of hope and desperation. "Hello?" I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm here to help." The face didn't speak, but I felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, relief, and an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Without hesitation, I set up my easel and began to paint. The process was more intense than ever before. Colors flowed from my brush in impossible combinations, creating depths and textures I'd never achieved. As I painted, I felt the lost soul's story unfold in my mind. He had been a logger, back when this forest was first being settled. An accident had left him pinned beneath a fallen tree, his cries for help unheard in the vast wilderness. As his life ebbed away, the forest had somehow captured his essence, trapping him between worlds. Tears streamed down my face as I captured his pain, his years of isolation, and finally the hope my presence had ignited. With each brushstroke, I could feel him growing stronger, more defined. As I added the final touches, a great wind whipped through the clearing. The painting seemed to glow, the logger's face becoming more and more lifelike until, with a flash of light, it vanished from the canvas. In its place was a serene image of the oak tree, bathed in warm sunlight. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted but elated. "Be free," I whispered to the empty air. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying what sounded like a faint "thank you." This became my routine over the next weeks. Each day, I'd venture deeper into the forest, seeking out lost souls to paint and release. Each experience was unique, but they all left me drained, both physically and emotionally. One particularly harrowing session involved the spirit of a young girl who had drowned in a hidden pond. As I painted her story, I could feel the icy water closing over my head, the panic and confusion as she slipped away. When I finally released her, I was shaking and gasping for air, as if I'd been submerged myself. As I stumbled back to my cabin that evening, I noticed something strange. The world around me seemed different. Shadows that had once been unremarkable now pulsed with hidden life. I could sense the presence of spirits everywhere, in the twist of a branch, the pattern of leaves on the ground, the very air around me. Is this what Edward Holloway experienced? I wondered aloud, remembering the vanished painter from the librarian's story. Back at the cabin, I collapsed onto my bed, every muscle aching. But despite my exhaustion, I felt a sense of purpose I'd never known before. I was making a difference, bringing peace to those long forgotten. As the days passed, word of my art began to spread. Hikers who stumbled upon my cabin reported feeling an inexplicable sense of calm when viewing the paintings displayed in my windows. Soon, people were making special trips just to see my work. One evening, as I was cleaning my brushes after another intense session, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a well-dressed woman with a portfolio tucked under her arm. "Olivia Reeves?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Goldstein from the Crimson Gallery in New York City. May I come in?" Stunned, I ushered her inside. The Crimson Gallery was one of the most prestigious art spaces in the country. What were they doing here? Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the paintings covering every available surface of my small cabin. "Extraordinary," she breathed. "The rumors don't do them justice." "Rumors?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. She turned to me, her eyes bright with excitement. "Ms. Reeves, your work is causing quite a stir in the art world. People are calling it transcendent, life-changing. We've had collectors offering obscene amounts for pieces they've only seen in photographs." I shifted uncomfortably, thinking of the spirits behind each painting. "They're not for sale," I said quietly. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "We thought you might say that. That's why I'm here with a different proposition." She pulled a sleek invitation from her portfolio. "We want to host an exhibition of your work at the Crimson Gallery, a showcase of your entire collection." My head spun. New York City? An entire exhibition? It seemed so far removed from the quiet, vital work I'd been doing here in the forest. I don't know," I stammered. "My work is very connected to this place. I'm not sure it would translate well to a city gallery." Sarah leaned forward, her expression earnest. "That's exactly why we want to bring it to New York. Your paintings capture something primal, something that speaks to people on a deep, almost spiritual level. In a world of chaos and noise, your art offers peace. Don't you want to share that with a wider audience?" The bustling sounds of New York City filtered through the windows of my temporary studio, a stark contrast to the quiet forests I'd grown accustomed to over the past months. I stood before a large canvas, brush in hand, adding the final touches to what would be the centerpiece of my exhibition. "Just a few more days," I murmured to the swirling shadows on the canvas. "Hold on a little longer." The painting pulsed with an otherworldly energy, the trapped souls within it restless and eager for release. I could feel their anticipation, their hope. But mixed with that was a gnawing guilt. For every soul I'd managed to free through my art, I knew there were countless others still waiting in the forests of New Hampshire. A knock at the door startled me from my reverie. "Ms. Hayes?" called a voice. "The car is here to take you to the gallery for final preparations." "Coming," I replied, quickly cleaning my brush and covering the canvas. I couldn't risk anyone seeing the painting in its current state. The moving shadows would raise too many questions. The ride to the gallery was a blur of city lights and honking horns. As we pulled up to the sleek building in Chelsea, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Inside, the gallery was a hive of activity. Staff members rushed about, hanging paintings and adjusting lighting. My agent Sarah spotted me and hurried over, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "Olivia, thank goodness you're here. We need your input on the placement of the Forest Whispers series." I followed her to a large wall where several of my paintings hung. To the untrained eye, they looked like beautifully rendered forest scenes. But I knew the truth. Each canvas held the essence of souls I'd helped free. As I studied the arrangement, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The shadows in the paintings were moving ever so slightly, reaching out towards the people in the gallery. "Is everything all right?" Sarah asked, noticing my distress. I forced a smile. "Yes, just overwhelmed. It looks perfect, Sarah." "Thank you." She beamed, oblivious to the supernatural drama unfolding before us. "Excellent. Now, let's go over the guest list for tonight's opening." The day passed in a whirlwind of last-minute preparations. As evening fell and the first guests began to arrive, I found myself standing in a corner nursing a glass of champagne and watching the crowd with wary eyes. Art critics, collectors, and socialites mingled, their chatter filling the space. But beneath the mundane sounds I could hear whispers, the voices of the souls in my paintings, growing stronger as more people gathered. "Remarkable work, Ms. Hayes," said a deep voice behind me. I turned to find a tall, elegantly dressed man studying me with intense dark eyes. Something about him set my nerves on edge. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood, Damian Blackwood." He extended a hand, which I shook hesitantly. His grip was cold and firm. "I'm something of a collector, specializing in unique pieces. Unique." As he spoke, I noticed the shadows at his feet behaving strangely, writhing and twisting in a way that had nothing to do with the gallery lighting. "I'm interested in acquiring your entire collection," he continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "Name your price." Alarm bells rang in my head. "I'm flattered, Mr. Blackwood, but these pieces aren't for sale as a collection. They're meant to be enjoyed individually, in people's homes." A flash of something, anger, frustration, crossed his face before his smooth smile returned. "I understand, but I insist you consider my offer. I'll be in touch." As he walked away, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was very wrong. I made my way through the crowd, keeping an eye on Blackwood. He moved from painting to painting, studying each one intently. The shadows seemed to react to his presence, growing darker and more agitated. As I passed a group of guests, I overheard a snippet of conversation that made me freeze. "Blackwood's planning something big with these paintings. Says they're the key to accessing untapped power." "But how? They're just landscapes." "Don't ask me. But he's offering a fortune to anyone who can help him acquire the full collection." My heart raced. Somehow Blackwood knew about the true nature of my paintings, and he wanted to use them for something terrible. I could feel it in my bones. I had to do something. These paintings, these souls I'd sworn to protect, they were in danger. But how could I stop Blackwood without revealing the truth to everyone here? As I pondered my dilemma, I felt a tug on my consciousness, the souls in the paintings reaching out to me in desperation. They could sense the danger too. "I won't let him take you," I whispered. "I promise." A plan began to form in my mind. It was risky, potentially career-ending, but I saw no other choice. I made my way to the back of the gallery, where the fuse box was located. With a quick glance to ensure no one was watching, I opened it and located the main power switch. "I'm sorry," I murmured, both to the paintings and to Sarah, who had worked so hard on this exhibition, "but I have to protect you." With a deep breath, I flipped the switch. The gallery was plunged into darkness. Gasps and confused murmurs filled the air. In the chaos that ensued, I slipped back into the main room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm," called out the gallery owner's voice. We're experiencing a minor technical difficulty. If everyone could please make their way to the exits in an orderly fashion." As people began to file out, guided by the emergency lights, I moved swiftly from painting to painting. In the darkness, I could see the shadows within them more clearly than ever, swirling and pulsing with energy. "It's time," I whispered to each canvas. "You need to go. Now." I focused all my energy, all the power I'd discovered over these past months, willing the souls to break free from their painted prisons. One by one, I felt them respond, the shadows detaching from the canvases and dissipating into the air. "Stop her!" Blackwood's voice cut through the darkness. "She's destroying them." Flashlight beams cut through the gloom, searching for me. But I kept moving, determined to free every last soul before Blackwood could stop me. As I reached the final painting, the centerpiece I'd been working on that very morning, I felt a hand grasp my arm. "You have no idea what you're doing," Blackwood hissed, his face illuminated by a nearby flashlight. "The power in these paintings, it could change the world." I met his gaze defiantly. "They're not meant for power. They're meant to be free." With my free hand, I touched the canvas. The shadows within it exploded outward, engulfing Blackwood and me in a whirlwind of ethereal energy. I heard him cry out, felt his grip loosen, and then silence. The emergency generators kicked in, flooding the gallery with light. I found myself alone, surrounded by blank canvases. Of Blackwood there was no sign. Sarah rushed over to me, her face a mask of confusion and concern. "Olivia, what happened? The paintings, they're gone." I looked around at the empty frames and bare canvases, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. "I know," I said softly. "But it's okay. They're where they need to be now." As the confused crowd of guests re-entered the gallery, murmuring in disbelief at the blank walls, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The souls were safe, free from both their painted prisons and Blackwood's nefarious plans. My career as an artist might be over, but I knew I had done the right thing. And as I stood there, surrounded by the evidence of my sacrifice, I felt the faintest whisper of gratitude brush against my consciousness. A final farewell from the souls I had helped set free. The exhibition was ruined, but my true work, my most important work, was complete. Whatever came next, I would face it knowing I had fulfilled my promise to the lost souls of the forest. The cool night air hit my face as I burst out of the gallery's emergency exit, my arms laden with as many canvases as I could carry. The cacophony of confused voices faded behind me, replaced by the pounding of my heart and the rapid slap of my shoes against the pavement. "Stop her!" Blackwood's voice rang out, closer than I'd hoped. I didn't dare look back, focusing instead on putting as much distance between myself and the gallery as possible. The streets of New York, usually so busy, seemed eerily empty. My footsteps echoed off the buildings, a frantic rhythm matching my racing pulse. As I rounded a corner, I heard the screech of tires. A sleek black car pulled up alongside me, the passenger window rolling down to reveal one of Blackwood's henchmen. "Ms. Hayes," he called out, his voice deceptively calm. "Mr. Blackwood would like a word. Why don't you come with us?" "Not a chance," I muttered, veering down a narrow alleyway. The car couldn't follow, but I heard car doors slamming and footsteps giving chase. My arms ached from the weight of the paintings, but I couldn't afford to slow down. These weren't just artworks. They were souls I'd sworn to protect. As I emerged onto another street, a strange sensation washed over me. The shadows cast by streetlights and buildings seemed to deepen, swirling with an otherworldly energy. I felt a familiar presence, the souls in my paintings, reaching out. "Help me," I whispered, not breaking stride. "Please." As if in response, the shadows sprang to life. They stretched across the sidewalk, tripping one of my pursuers. Another shadow wrapped itself around a street sign, bending it to block the path of an oncoming henchman. I allowed myself a small smile. Even in this urban jungle far from the forest where I'd first encountered them, the shadows were on my side. But my relief was short-lived. Up ahead, I saw Blackwood step out of another vehicle, his dark eyes fixed on me with predatory intensity. "Enough games, Ms. Hayes," he called out. "You have no idea what forces you're dealing with." I skidded to a halt, looking frantically for an escape route. That's when I saw it. An old church, its stone facade standing out among the modern buildings. Something pulled me towards it, an instinct I'd learned to trust over these past months. With a burst of speed, I dashed towards the church, taking the steps 2 at a time. The heavy wooden doors creaked as I pushed through them, the sound echoing in the cavernous space beyond. The interior was dimly lit, dusty pews stretching out before a grand altar. But what caught my eye were the shadows. They danced along the walls, more active and alive than I'd ever seen them. I set the paintings down carefully, leaning them against the altar. To my amazement, they began to glow with a soft, otherworldly light. "What's happening?" I whispered, reaching out to touch one of the canvases. Before I could make contact, the church doors burst open. Blackwood strode in, flanked by his henchmen. Gone was the suave art collector. His face was twisted into a snarl, his eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. "You've led me on quite a chase, Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice deeper and more guttural than before. "But playtime is over. Hand over the paintings." I stood my ground, placing myself between Blackwood and the glowing canvases. "Never. I don't know what you are, but I know you mean these souls harm. I won't let you have them." Blackwood laughed, a chilling sound that echoed off the church walls. "What I am? I'm surprised you haven't figured it out yet, given your unique talents." As he spoke, his form seemed to shimmer and distort. His expensive suit melted away, replaced by shadows that clung to him like a second skin. Horns sprouted from his forehead, and his fingers elongated into wicked claws. You're a demon," I gasped, my mind reeling. "Very good," Blackwood, or whatever he truly was, purred. "And those lovely paintings of yours? They're a feast. Do you have any idea how rare it is to find souls trapped between worlds, ripe for the taking?" I felt sick. All this time, I thought I'd been helping these souls find peace. Had I just been preparing them to be devoured by this monster? "Don't look so distraught," the demon continued, taking a step closer. "You've done me a great service, gathering all these delectable morsels in one place. I'll make your death quick as a reward." I backed up against the altar, my hand brushing against one of the paintings. As I touched it, I felt a surge of energy, not just from that canvas, but from all of them. The souls were reaching out, lending me their strength. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're wrong. I didn't trap these souls. I freed them, and they're stronger than you know." The demon's eyes narrowed. "Foolish girl. You have no idea of the powers you're dealing with." He lunged forward, claws extended. But before he could reach me, the paintings erupted with light. Shadows poured from the canvases, but these weren't the formless shapes I was used to. They took on distinct forms. Men, women, children, all those I'd painted over the past months. The demon recoiled, hissing in pain as the light touched him. "What is this? What have you done?" I watched in awe as the souls surrounded the demon, their combined light pushing him back. His henchmen, faced with the supernatural display, turned and fled. "You wanted to feed on these souls?" I called out, feeling emboldened. "Well, it looks like they have other ideas." The demon thrashed and snarled, but he was overwhelmed. The souls pressed in, their light growing brighter and brighter until I had to shield my eyes. There was a final inhuman scream, and then silence. When I lowered my arm, the demon was gone. The souls hovered in the air, their forms slowly fading as the first light of dawn began to filter through the church windows. "Thank you," I whispered, tears in my eyes. "I'm so sorry for putting you in danger. I never meant..." A warm breeze rustled through the church. carrying with it a chorus of whispers. I couldn't make out words, but the sentiment was clear: gratitude, forgiveness, and a final farewell. One by one, the souls faded away, moving on to whatever awaited them beyond this world. As the last one disappeared, I felt a profound sense of completion. My journey wasn't over. I knew there were more lost souls out there. But this chapter had come to a close. I sank to my knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Exhausted. The paintings around me were now truly blank, their purpose fulfilled. As the sun rose, casting long shadows through the church windows, I allowed myself a moment of peace. But I knew this was just the beginning. The demon might be gone, but there were likely others out there, hunting lost souls for their own nefarious purposes. And I was perhaps the only one who could stand in their way. As I gathered myself and the now empty canvases, preparing to leave the sanctuary of the church, I made a silent vow. I would continue my work, not just as an artist, but as a protector of lost souls. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dark forces I might face, I was ready. The shadows stretched before me as I stepped out into the early morning light. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. Instead, I felt purpose. The pursuit was over, but my true journey was just beginning. The world around me shimmered and shifted, reality bleeding away like watercolors in the rain. One moment I was standing in the church, surrounded by blank canvases, and the next, I found myself in a place beyond imagination. The ground beneath my feet was a swirling mass of shadows and mist, constantly reshaping itself. The sky, if you could call it that, was a kaleidoscope of muted colors, occasionally torn by flashes of otherworldly lightning. "Where am I?" I whispered, my voice sounding muffled and distant. A familiar, chilling laugh echoed around me. "Welcome to my domain, Ms. Hayes." I spun around to see Blackwood, no, the demon, materializing from the shadows. He looked different here, more monstrous, his form constantly shifting between human and something far more terrifying. "But how?" "I saw you destroyed," I stammered, backing away. The demon grinned, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Destroyed? Hardly. You merely banished me from your realm, and in doing so you followed me right into mine." Panic rose in my throat as I realized the truth of his words. Somehow, in that final confrontation in the church, I had been pulled into this nightmarish in-between world. "The souls," I said, looking around frantically. "Where are they?" As if in answer, I saw faint, glowing shapes in the distance, the souls I had freed, now lost and confused in this alien landscape. "Ah, yes, my wayward feast," the demon purred. "Thank you for bringing them here. They'll sustain me for quite some time." With a roar, he lunged towards the nearest cluster of souls. They scattered, their terror palpable even in this strange realm. "No!" I shouted, reaching out instinctively. To my amazement, the misty ground responded to my gesture. It rose up, forming a barrier between the demon and his prey. The souls quickly took refuge behind it. The demon snarled in frustration, turning his burning gaze on me. "How dare you interfere?" "I've sworn to protect them," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I won't let you harm them." As the demon charged towards me, I focused on the swirling environment around us. If this realm responded to my will, perhaps. I imagined my paintbrush in hand, sweeping broad strokes across this living canvas. The mist coalesced, forming a series of floating islands, safe havens for the souls to retreat to. "Quickly," I called out to the glowing shapes. "Get to higher ground." The souls responded, flowing like luminous rivers towards the floating sanctuaries I had created. The demon howled in rage, clawing at the air as his quarry escaped. "Impressive," he growled, circling me. "But do you really think you can outmaneuver me in my own realm? I am master here." The landscape churned at his command, jagged spires of shadow erupting from the ground around me. I leapt and dodged, barely avoiding being impaled. "You may be the master," I panted, "but I'm the artist." With that declaration, I focused all my will on the realm around us. Colors bloomed across the sky, bright and vibrant. The murky ground solidified into a mosaic of intricate patterns. Even the air seemed to shimmer with newfound life. The demon recoiled, hissing as the transformed environment sapped his strength. "What are you doing?" "Creating," I said simply. "This place doesn't have to be a nightmare. It can be beautiful." As I spoke, I felt a warmth spreading through me. The souls I had freed were gathering, drawn to the oasis of color and life I had painted into existence. Their light grew stronger, pushing back the oppressive shadows. "No," the demon roared. "This is my domain. You cannot take it from me." He lashed out with tendrils of darkness, but they dissipated as they touched the glowing barrier of souls that now surrounded me. One of the souls, a young woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice was like a whisper on the wind. "Thank you for freeing us. Now let us help you." Suddenly, I felt an influx of energy, the combined strength of all the souls flowing into me. My vision sharpened, the realm around me coming into even clearer focus. The demon, sensing the shift in power, began to back away. "This isn't over, Hayes. You may have won this battle, but the war—" "Oh, I think it is over," I interrupted, raising my hand. With a thought, I conjured a giant canvas in the air between us. The demon's eyes widened in realization and fear. "No, you wouldn't dare." But I would. With all the skill and power at my command, I began to paint. The canvas came alive with swirling colors and shapes, forming a portal back to the real world, my world. The suction was immediate and intense. The demon dug his claws into the ground, fighting against the pull of my painted gateway. "You'll regret this, Hayes," he snarled. "I'll find a way back, and when I do—" His threat was cut short as he lost his grip, hurtling towards the canvas. At the last moment, I altered the portal, transforming it into a prison rather than a passage. The demon howled in rage and despair as he was pulled into the painting, his form twisting and distorting until he was nothing more than a grotesque swirl of dark pigments on the canvas. As the last of his essence was absorbed, the canvas fell to the misty ground with a dull thud. The realm around us calmed, the violent energies dissipating. I approached the painting cautiously, half expecting the demon to burst free. But the canvas remained still, the trapped demon nothing more than an abstract nightmare captured in oils. The young soul who had spoken earlier approached me. "It's over," she said softly. "You've won?" I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "But what now? How do we get back?" The soul smiled, gesturing to the vibrant world I had created around us. "You've already shown us the way. Your art is the bridge between worlds. You can lead us home." Understanding dawned on me. I closed my eyes, imagining the church where this journey had begun. When I opened them, a new portal had formed, a door of light leading back to the real world. One by one, the souls passed through, each pausing to express their gratitude. As the last one crossed over, I picked up the canvas containing the trapped demon. "I'll make sure you never harm another soul," I promised the silent painting. With a deep breath, I stepped through the portal. There was a moment of disorientation, and then I was back in the church, the first light of dawn streaming through the windows. The blank canvases still leaned against the altar, but now I understood their true purpose. They weren't just art. They were gateways, tools for rescuing lost souls. As I gazed at the empty canvases, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. There were more souls out there, trapped between worlds, in need of salvation. And I had been given a gift, the ability to find them, to free them, and to protect them from the dark forces that would do them harm. I gathered my supplies, including the canvas prison holding the demon, and stepped out of the church. The city was waking up, unaware of the battle that had been fought in realms beyond their understanding. But I knew, and I was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The war might not be over, but I was no longer fighting alone. With every stroke of my brush, I would bring light to the darkness, and with every painting, I would hope to the lost and beauty to the in-between spaces where reality blurred. The battle was won, but my journey as an artist, protector, and bridge between worlds was just beginning. The first thing I noticed was the scent of pine and damp earth. My eyes fluttered open, squinting against the dappled sunlight filtering through a canopy of leaves. For a moment, I lay there, disoriented, trying to piece together where I was and how I'd gotten there. "The forest," I murmured, slowly sitting up. My head spun, memories flooding back in a chaotic rush. The gallery, the demon, the battle in that surreal in-between world. Had it all been real? As my vision cleared, I gasped. Scattered around me in a rough circle were my paintings, propped against trees or lying in the soft undergrowth. But they weren't the haunting, shadow-filled works I remembered creating. Instead, each canvas depicted serene landscapes bathed in warm, golden light. I crawled over to the nearest one, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch it. The paint was dry, the texture familiar under my fingertips, but the scene, it showed a sun-dappled clearing, wild flowers swaying in a gentle breeze. There was a sense of peace emanating from the canvas, so palpable I could almost feel it. "How is this possible?" I whispered, looking around at the other paintings. Each one was similar, beautiful, tranquil scenes that seemed to glow with an inner light. As I gathered my strength to stand, I noticed something else. The forest itself felt different. The oppressive weight, the sense of watching eyes and lurking shadows that had been my constant companions for months. It was gone. The woods felt lighter, alive with the natural sounds of birds and rustling leaves. I closed my eyes, reaching out with that extra sense I'd developed during my time painting lost souls. There was still energy here, but it was changed. No longer did I feel the desperate pull of trapped spirits. Instead, there was a gentle warmth like the afterglow of a beautiful sunset. "Hello?" I called out, my voice carrying through the trees. Is anyone still here?" For a long moment, there was only the natural sounds of the forest. Then, carried on a breeze that ruffled my hair, I heard it. A whisper, so faint I might have imagined it. "Thank you." Tears sprang to my eyes as I realized the truth. It hadn't been a dream. Somehow, the battle in that other realm had affected this one. The souls I'd freed, they were truly gone, moved on to whatever awaited them beyond this world. I gathered my paintings, stacking them carefully. As I picked up the last one, I noticed it was different from the others. Instead of a landscape, it showed a swirling, chaotic mass of dark colors. With a shudder, I realized what, or rather, who, it contained. "You're staying with me," I muttered to the canvas, tucking it securely under my arm. "I'm not taking any chances." With my arms full of artwork, I began to make my way through the forest. It was slow going, but I was surprised to find I knew exactly where I was. My feet seemed to find the path without conscious thought, leading me back towards civilization. As I walked, I found myself talking out loud, processing everything that had happened. So, it was all real. The demon, the battle, freeing the souls. But how did I end up back here, and how long have I been gone? My phone, I realized, was dead. Whether from the supernatural events or simply from being in the forest for who knows how long, I couldn't say. I'd have to wait until I reached my cabin to get any answers about how much time had passed. The sun was high in the sky by the time I emerged from the tree line, my cabin coming into view. It looked exactly as I'd left it, which was both comforting and unsettling. Surely I'd been gone for days, at least. Inside, I set down my paintings and immediately went to plug in my phone. As it slowly came to life, I was stunned to see the date. "One day?" I exclaimed. "How is that possible?" According to my phone, less than 24 hours had passed since the gallery opening in New York. There were dozens of missed calls and messages, most from Sarah, my agent. The last one, sent just an hour ago, caught my eye. "Olivia, where are you? The police are involved now. Please, just let us know you're safe." I sank onto my bed, overwhelmed. How could I possibly explain what had happened? Would anyone believe me? As I contemplated my next move, my gaze fell on the paintings leaning against the wall. They seemed to glow in the dim light of the cabin, a reminder of everything I'd been through, everything I'd learned. I can't just go back to my old life, I realized. Not after this. With a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah's number. It rang only once before she answered, her voice frantic. "Olivia! Oh, thank God, where are you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm back at my cabin in New Hampshire. I'm sorry for worrying everyone, but something came up. Something important." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Sarah spoke again, her tone was carefully neutral. "Olivia, what happened at the gallery? The paintings, they're all blank. And the security footage shows you running out with an armful of canvases. Then you just disappeared." I closed my eyes, trying to find the right words. "Sarah, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to listen. Those paintings, they were more than just art. They were souls, trapped between worlds. And there was someone, something, trying to harm them. I had to protect them." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice tight with concern. "Olivia, are you sure you're all right? Maybe we should send someone to check on you." "No," I said firmly. "I know how it sounds, but I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I've found my purpose, Sarah. Those souls, I helped them move on. And there are more out there who need my help." "Olivia," Sarah began, but I cut her off. "I know you don't understand. I'm not sure I fully understand it myself. But I can't go back to the way things were. I need to continue this work." There was another long pause. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was resigned. "What do you need from me?" I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. "Just cover for me for now. Tell everyone I'm taking a sabbatical, exploring new artistic directions. It's not even a lie, really. And the blank canvases? The ruined exhibition?" I glanced at the paintings propped against my wall, their peaceful scenes a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past day. "Tell them it was performance art, a statement on the ephemeral nature of creativity or something. Use your PR magic, Sarah. I trust you." After finalizing a few details with Sarah, I ended the call and stepped outside. The afternoon sun was warm on my face, the forest alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Everything looked the same, and yet, everything had changed. I walked to my car, parked where I'd left it before my fateful trip to New York. As I slid into the driver's seat, a plan began to form in my mind. I'd need supplies, more canvases, maybe some books on local legends and folklore. If there were more lost souls out there, I was determined to find them, to help them. As I turned the key in the ignition, something in the rearview mirror caught my eye. For just a moment I saw them. Transparent, glowing figures standing at the edge of the forest. The lost souls I'd freed, smiling and waving in farewell before fading into the light. "Goodbye," I whispered, a tear sliding down my cheek. "And thank you." I put the car in drive, heading down the winding road that would take me back to town. As I drove, I felt a sense of purpose settling over me like a warm blanket. The battle might be over, but my journey was just beginning. In the passenger seat, the canvas containing the trapped demon seemed to pulse with a dull energy. A reminder of the dangers that still lurked in the shadows, waiting to prey on lost souls. But I wasn't afraid. I had seen the power of art, of creation, to overcome even the darkest forces. As the forest receded behind me, I smiled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dark forces I might face, I was ready. With every stroke of my brush, I would bring light to the darkness, hope to the lost, and beauty to the in-between spaces where reality blurred. The gentle scratch of brush against canvas filled the air, mingling with the soft sounds of nature drifting in through the open windows. I stood before my easel, adding the final touches to my latest work, a vibrant landscape that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. And with that, I murmured, setting down my brush, "It's finished." I stepped back, taking in the full effect of the painting. Like all my works over the past decade, it radiated a sense of peace and tranquility that went beyond mere pigment and texture. There was something more, something that spoke to the soul. A knock at the studio door pulled me from my reverie. "Come in," I called out. The door opened, revealing a young woman with bright eyes and paint-splattered clothes. "Ms. Hayes, the new group of students has arrived. They're waiting in the main cabin." I smiled, wiping my hands on a nearby cloth. "Thank you, Emma. I'll be right there." As Emma left, I cast one last look at my painting. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement within the canvas, a fleeting shape, bathed in warm light. But then it was gone, leaving only the serene landscape behind. I made my way across the grounds of what had once been my solitary cabin in the White Mountains. Now it was the heart of a thriving artist's retreat, a place where creators from all walks of life came to learn, to grow, and sometimes to see beyond the veil of ordinary reality. The main cabin was filled with the excited chatter of new arrivals. As I entered, the room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. I recognized the mix of awe and curiosity in their gazes, a reaction I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "Welcome to Shadowlight Retreat," I said, smiling warmly at the group. "I'm Olivia Hayes. You've all come here for different reasons, to hone your craft, to find inspiration, to break through creative blocks. But I hope that during your time here, you'll discover something more, a deeper connection to your art, to the world around you, and perhaps to realms beyond our ordinary perception." A hand shot up, a young man with vibrant blue hair. "Ms. Hayes, is it true that your paintings can heal people?" I chuckled softly. Heal is a strong word, but yes, many have found a sense of peace and well-being through my work. Art has power, more power than most realize. That's part of what I hope to teach you during your stay here. Another student, an older woman with kind eyes, spoke up. "I've heard stories. They say you can see things others can't. That your paintings sometimes show spirits?" A hush fell over the room. This was always a delicate moment. The line between inspiring wonder and sounding like a complete lunatic was thin indeed. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. What I see, what I paint, it's not always easy to explain. But I believe that art can be a bridge between worlds, a way to give form to the formless, to bring light to the shadows. Whether you want to call that spirituality, imagination, or something else entirely, that's up to you. The discussion continued, students asking questions about technique, inspiration, and yes, the more mysterious aspects of my work. As always, I walked the line between honesty and discretion. Not everyone was ready to know the full truth of what I'd experienced, of the battles fought in realms beyond ordinary perception. As the orientation session wound down, I noticed one student hanging back, a girl no older than 20, with a haunted look in her eyes that I recognized all too well. Once the others had filed out, I approached her. "Is everything all right?" She startled as if pulled from deep thought. "Oh, yes, I'm sorry. It's just..." She trailed off, her gaze darting around the room nervously. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Lily," she replied. "Lily Chen." I nodded, waiting patiently for her to continue. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ms. Hayes, can you really see spirits?" The question hung in the air between us. I studied Lily's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. "Sometimes," I said softly, "when they want to be seen." "Lily, are you seeing something?" Or someone? Tears welled up in her eyes. My brother. He died last year. Car accident. But I keep seeing him. Not just in dreams, but everywhere. People think I'm crazy, but I placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You're not crazy, Lily. Some souls, they have trouble moving on. They get stuck, trapped between worlds. Lily's eyes widened. Can you help him? Please, I think he's in pain. He looks so lost. I closed my eyes, reaching out with that extra sense I'd honed over the years. And there he was, a faint flickering presence hovering near Lily. A soul unable to let go, tethered to the world of the living by love and unfinished business. I can try, I said, opening my eyes. But Lily, you need to understand. Helping him move on, it means saying goodbye. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I just want him to be at peace. Over the next week, as the other students immersed themselves in workshops and creative exercises, Lily and I worked on a special project. Together, we created a painting, a bridge between worlds, a doorway for her brother's lost soul. As we added the final brushstrokes, I felt the familiar surge of energy, the thinning of the veil between worlds. And there he was, Lily's brother, his form becoming clearer and more solid with each passing moment. Jack, Lily whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The spirit smiled, reaching out a hand that nearly but not quite touched his sister's cheek. Lily, I'm so sorry. I never meant to scare you, I couldn't leave without knowing you'd be okay. I stood back, giving them space for their final goodbye. There were tears and laughter, years of unspoken words finally given voice. And then, slowly, Jack's form began to fade. It's time, I said softly. Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. Goodbye, Jack. I love you. I'll always love you. With a final smile, Jack's spirit disappeared into the painting, leaving behind only a sense of warmth and peace. In the days that followed, I noticed a change in Lily. The haunted look in her eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet strength and a newfound passion for her art. As the retreat came to a close, Lily approached me one last time. Ms. Hayes, thank you for everything. I think I finally understand what you meant about art being a bridge between worlds. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was why I did what I did, not for fame or fortune, but for moments like these. Moments of healing, of connection, of bridging the gap between worlds. That night, after all the students had departed, I found myself drawn to the forest. The trees welcomed me like old friends, their branches swaying in a gentle breeze. As I walked deeper into the woods, I felt the familiar tingle of energy. But it was different now. No longer did shadows lurk at the corners of my vision. Instead, the forest seemed to glow with a soft, warm light. I closed my eyes, reaching out with my senses, and there they were. Not lost souls, but spirits at peace. The forest guardians, the nature spirits, the essence of life itself. They danced around me, their joy palpable. A vision washed over me, the forest as it truly was, free from the malevolent shadows that had once plagued it. I saw years of my work, countless souls guided to peace, each one adding their light to this place. The forest had become a sanctuary, a place of healing and renewal. As the vision faded, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun all those years ago with a single haunting painting had come full circle. I made my way back to my studio, my heart full. There was one last painting to be done, my masterpiece, my legacy. For days, I worked tirelessly, pouring everything I had learned, everything I had experienced into this final canvas. As I added the last brushstroke, I felt a familiar sensation, the thinning of the veil, the opening of a doorway between worlds. But this time, it was different. This time, I was not guiding a lost soul to the other side. This time, the doorway was for me. I stepped back, taking in the completed work. It showed a forest bathed in golden light, with a path leading to a radiant doorway. And there, waiting at the threshold, were all the souls I had helped over the years, including, I realized with a start, my own parents. A profound peace settled over me. I understood now. My work was done. I had found my purpose, had brought light to the shadows and hope to the lost. And now, it was time for me to take that final journey. As I felt my spirit begin to separate from my physical form, I smiled. There was no fear, no regret, only a sense of homecoming. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty studio, to the paintings that had been my life's work, to the forest that had started it all. "Thank you for this incredible journey." And with that, Olivia Hayes, artist, guardian, bridge between worlds, stepped into her final masterpiece, ready to join those she had helped cross over. But her legacy remained, in the paintings that continued to bring peace to viewers, in the students she had taught to see beyond the visible, and in the forest that now thrived with positive energy. A testament to the power of art to transform, to heal, and to bridge the gap between worlds.